Hello and welcome to Draft Day. My name is John Fleming. I am one of the hosts of Draft Day. And wouldn't you know it, I'm joined by the other host of Draft Day, Jason Bradshaw. Jason, how are you?
I'm surprised to be here still too, John. But pretty monumental episode today. For episode number 11, if I have counted correctly. So
I have not counted. I will take your word for it. I could probably figure out like the pattern of what sports we've done, but I don't really care enough to. So let's just
yeah,
bypass that because the topic that we're going to be covering in today's episode, we have some thoughts on. So
we do
be
indeed.
that should be pressing. So, for anybody who's not aware, who just listens to this podcast because you're into like sports drafts or whatever, the name of our show obviously is Draft Day, and the cover art is a picture of my face on top of the face of the actor Kevin Costner, who is the star of the 2014 film Draft Day. This is a movie that is coming up on its 10-year anniversary. The NFL draft is scheduled for Thursday, April 25th. Unless I screw something up badly, that is when this episode is dropping. But rather than discuss the upcoming NFL draft, which I don't really know that much about, and I'm better at speaking about these things in hindsight, we're going to talk about the film that gave us our title, and has been obviously a great inspiration in our lives.
Yeah, it's a cinematic master something. I'm not really sure what, but it's definitely made an impact.
Yeah, of all of the films that have been released, this is certainly one of them.
It sure is.
Yeah, so this is a film that, according to its IMDb page, was nominated for one single award in like any award sort of thing, which was an award from the I don't remember the exact organization. It's an association of female film critics that gave it a nomination for most egregious age gap between a couple between old Kevin Costner and Jennifer Garner. We'll have a lot of thoughts about that relationship coming up.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So I have it on good authority, and by good authority I mean from you, that you have prepared some trivia for the festivities. Do we want to do that now, or do we want to wait until a little bit into really know the nature of trivia?
Go ahead and do it. I think it'll set the stage a lot, and then we won't have to necessarily cut any trains of thought short. So, for anybody who doesn't know, some high level things. Draft Day movie released in 2014. Some big stars in the movie, as we said, Jennifer Garner, Kevin Costner being the top two billed. Also had a young, an up and coming Chadwick Boseman in the film. Directed by a legendary director in Ivan Reitman.
His last film.
His last film, not exactly the type of movie you would think to be directed by Ivan Reitman. Just kind of given his filmography and some of the other great things that he had directed, but alas, here we are. So, thinking back to that wonderful year in movies in 2014, John, I got a couple of questions that are going to first. Okay. So, the first one, I have 7 questions here. So, the overview for why I did it is that was the original pick the Browns had in the movie Draft Day was the 7th pick.
It's true.
And so, John, I hold you to a high standard. I'll say 5 out of 7 gets you a passing grade on these.
Okay. I mean, I think I'm trying to do the math on what 4 divided by 7 would be. If that would be over,
it'd be
60%.
It'd be close.
Yeah, I feel like that would be like in the high 50s.
Yeah. If you get to 4 out of 7, or you get partials right on some of these that are multiple parts, we'll talk. But so the first question is, shockingly, it wasn't Draft Day, but what was the highest grossing movie the year Draft Day was released? If you don't know the exact movie, if you can tell me, I'll tell you it's a franchise movie. If you can tell me the franchise, I will award you the point for this question.
So I two movies that popped to my head right away, one of which is a franchise movie, one of which is not a franchise movie. One of my
This is
thoughts was American.
worldwide. It's a worldwide
Okay.
gross for the record.
Yeah. So one of my thoughts was American Sniper, but I believe that was released in like late 2014, so it probably did a lot of its accumulating in 2015.
I mean, I would count its entire gross
Okay. I mean,
towards
I
this
still was kind
for a
of,
film released in 14, but
yeah, I was kind of putting it on the back burner anyway. I am going to say Guardians of the Galaxy.
and that would be incorrect. That is
Don't
the
like
third
that.
highest grossing film in 2014. The number two grossing film was The Hobbit: Battle of the Five Armies,
Okay.
which is the third one in the Hobbit trilogy. Which is, well, don't get me started on that. That's for a different show. But the number one with a $1.1 billion worldwide gross was Transformers: Age of Extinction, driven.
Yeah, I would never have come up with the title of that movie. I might have
Yeah,
come across Transformers
yeah.
series, which I
If you
appreciate.
would have said it was a Transformers movie, I was going to give it to you. But yeah, driven heavily by $858.6 million outside the domestic box office. For the record, American Sniper came in 13th. But I believe American Sniper actually was the highest grossing domestic film that year.
Yeah, I can think of various reasons that American Sniper would not do as well outside of the country that's in the name of the movie.
Yeah. Although, a movie like Oppenheimer did quite well around the world.
That's true.
And even recently got released in Japan. So,
Got to be an awkward one.
yeah. All right. So, John, this one's fun. I'm giving you a leeway of 20 on either side. Within 20, where did Draft Day finish the year in terms of worldwide box office for 2014?
Well, I know from the minimal box office research that I did that it was not considered much of a box office success. It probably grossed around like 20, 30 million. I can't imagine, and I think that was in the US, but I can't imagine it did much business outside of the United States for reasons that we'll get into.
It did less than $1 million outside the US.
Yeah. I mean, the reasons it didn't do well are somewhat obvious, but there's some further extrapolations from that again, we'll get into. I'm going to say, I mean, even like the weekend it came out, I can't imagine it was high. I can't imagine it was like ever the number one movie at the box office, even if it started out hot and then fell off. I will say it was 75th.
Oh, man, you had still very high expectations.
I don't know how many movies there are.
Say. Yeah, I mean, these first two, honestly, might be the hardest questions, but
Well, that's
I still have
good.
faith you can get it. Yeah, 181st.
Oh, dear God. Okay.
There was another football movie that finished one spot ahead of it. Had a worldwide draft. Had a worldwide gross of 29.8 million.
Okay.
This movie had a 30, and I'm not gonna lie, I've never heard of this football movie called "When the Game Stands Tall," starring Jim Caviezel. Apparently, it's like a high school football coach that took a team on like a 151 game winning streak based on a true story kind of thing. But
yeah, I've heard that. I've
movie
heard of it
made
before.
more.
Yeah,
both domestically and worldwide. So, all right. So in that vein, we talked about this being the final film directed by Ivan Reitman. Among his 15 credited directed films, where does Draft Day rank in terms of worldwide box office?
Are we saying for the total, like not inflation adjusted?
Not inflation adjusted, just raw number.
Okay.
I'll give it to you if you're within two.
Yeah. I mean, in theory, I could start kind of rattling off like the movies of his that I know. Pretty much all of those movies, I assume, grossed higher, even if they were quite a bit older. But like obviously, like Ghostbusters gross higher than Draft Day, and
still one of the highest grossing comedies of all time, and it came out in 1984.
yeah, like Twins and all that is higher. I don't think it's going to be last, but the 15. I do think that if I remember correctly, and I probably should have done more research into his career for the sake of the pod, but if I remember correctly, he started off with some somewhat smaller movies, and those are small enough that I'm guessing that maybe if you adjusted for inflation, they'd be doing better, but probably not here. I will
Yeah,
say
and some of those may be so small. Like this is, I'll say he has 15 credited. I don't think any of those small ones that you're talking about he started with are on here. I'll give you that.
yeah.
And the research
I'm
I
gonna
did where it was able to give me a list.
I'm gonna say the Draft Day of the 15 ranks 12th.
It is last.
Oh, that
It is
seems
dead last.
impossible. How does
Me-
somebody's last movie? That
I mean,
seems
it was
ridiculous.
outgrossed by Meatballs, dude. And apparently the movie Father's Day also outgrossed it.
I don't think I even know what I know Meatballs. I'm not sure if I know what Father's Day
Yeah,
is.
me neither. Some other like some great movie. Like I'll say this: the movie Dave grossly underperformed. That movie's awesome.
Yeah, I
If
mean,
you've never seen Dave, like Dave's good movie.
yeah, and there's some couple parallels of Draft Day with Dave in terms of actors crossing over, but
For sure.
yeah, this is
But
like we're gonna get into it, but there's like some big names in this movie, and like Rotten Tomatoes score is like kind of mixed reviews, but it wasn't like it
yeah,
being like Savage is the worst movie of all time
dude,
or anything. Let's
you're like alluding to future questions here, man. Like this is crazy.
okay.
But next question I have is obviously we've already talked. Chadwick Boseman stars in the film as Vontae Malik, and this was not his first sports or football movie he was in. However, I will just ask you to name one other sports film in which he appeared. There's an obvious one that I assume you'll get.
Okay. Yes. The one that I will get was from the year before, and that is the film 42. I will
That's
take that
correct.
as my credit. Um, I'm trying to think of other football movies could have credibly been in. I'm thinking it had to have been in a smaller role. Um,
He's in a smaller role. I will say it is, in terms of storyline, akin a little bit to an area of football like Jackie Robinson was to baseball.
yeah, so that actually does kind of dovetail into what I was thinking, which is the Ernie Davis movie, The Express.
That is correct. He is in the
Right.
Ernie Davis movie. So he is not Ernie Davis, but he is
Yeah.
in that
Does he
film.
have
So John is
player on
on the board,
Syracuse or
y'all. Yeah, I think he's just like another guy. I'll be honest, I haven't seen it. I was just kind of researching
I've also never seen
other
it.
stuff. So, speaking of stars that are not in this movie very much, and not necessarily at the pedigree of a Chadwick Boseman, but Terry Crews is in the movie. Big
That's
Terry
true.
Crews fan. He stars as the father of Ray Jennings, who's played by, this isn't the question, but
Played by Arian Foster.
he played by NFL running back or former NFL running back Arian Foster. Shout out to one of our friends who I remember just absolutely loving everything about him in fantasy.
Yeah, I named one of my fantasy teams Aryan Supremacy because I'm a very
You
delicate
certainly
person.
did. You should have stuck to the Mendenhall Notes style names.
That would require me employing Richard Mendenhall more than that one season.
That's fair. But so Terry Crews, though, was a member of the NFL for, I think, a number of seasons. Can you name two teams that Terry Crews was on the roster of? There are three total that he was on. I only want two.
I do know for a fact from kind of looking at IMDb that the Browns are not one of them.
That is
So
correct.
I can bypass that. I'm going to guess. I'll say he was on the Raiders.
Okay. And what's your other guess?
Oh, my other guess, I will say he was on. I feel like I'm just trying to like imagine what team Terry Tate office linebacker would be most qualified to be on. I'll say he was on the Detroit Lions. So Raiders and Lions are my guesses.
All right. 0 for 2. Good guesses.
They were not good guesses.
The Rams, of course.
The LA
The
Rams, I assume.
Chargers. LA Rams, the Chargers, and the Washington
Chargers.
Redskins at the time. Now Commanders.
Yes.
I knew
So
those,
yeah.
but I'm a fan of Terry Crews.
So he's been on 3 different teams, none of which go by the name that they were going by well, I guess the Rams are, but they had a...
Yeah, the Rams are back to be the Los Angeles Rams.
Yes.
Yeah. So, all right. Alluding to the cast, can you name for me the 5 members of the cast who have an Academy Award nominee?
Okay. So
at least a nominee, obviously, if they won. That's considered a nominee.
Is this a nomination for any award?
Yes. So if you want to throw... It doesn't have to be an acting.
Okay. So I think Kevin Costner probably got nominated for actor for Dances with Wolves, but he definitely won director. So I'll say Kevin Costner.
He definitely won director. So that's one of them.
Chadwick Boseman was nominated for at least one, because he was nominated for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom whenever they had the weird switcheroo.
Yeah.
With, Anthony Hopkins.
And then Anthony Hopkins won. And it's like, show's over. That was awkward. Yes. But yes, that's 2 of them.
Frank Langella was nominated for Frost Nixon, I believe.
That is correct. That's 3.
Okay. Ellen Burstyn won. She won for Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, and was nominated for like Requiem for a Dream, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, one more.
One more. This is the hardest one. He doesn't play a huge part, and he only has 1 nomination.
Okay.
But I will say it's a fairly recent nomination.
Well, I noticed.
And I think I just told you it's a man too. I told you it's a man. I know it was not Jennifer Garner. She has multiple Emmy nominations, but no Academy Award nominations.
There was a part of me in the back of my head that maybe she got like supporting actress for Dallas Buyers Club, but nice to know that I don't have to concern myself.
That was all Jared and Matthew.
Well, yes, but we can ride coattails.
Yeah, I guess I was. No.
Yeah, I gotta start. I definitely don't want to drag on too long. I'm just thinking of like every random Browns employee throughout the movie. I don't think any of the other players. I don't believe Arian Foster parlayed this into a successful acting career.
He did not.
Yeah, so man, I will say I'm wondering if like one of the NFL players that made a cameo like got like a producer nom, like in the same way that Kobe's an Oscar winner, like that kind of thing.
Oh, his short film.
For his short film, yeah. I can't think of anything. I don't think Dennis Leary was ever nominated for anything. Well, he hasn't been in a movie since Draft Day, so he certainly wouldn't have been recent years. I am going to because he's the most famous actor I can think of in the movie that I'm not really that familiar with their body of work. I'll go with Kevin Dunn. I don't think that's right, but I got
incorrect. We were looking for the Wisconsin Badgers head coach, played by Sam Elliott.
Yeah, for Stars Born.
Stars Born, for playing Bradley Cooper's brother or whatever he was. He was the he got a supporting actor nomination.
Yeah, that was a bad miss for me.
Which sidebar, we can talk about this more, but like to me, to have a guy who's a college football head coach, he's like the perfect casting to me, for the record. Now, the actual scene itself, we can talk about that. But
we will get to it.
I have thoughts, but All right, and the last one you were alluding to Rotten Tomatoes. So, does this have a higher Rotten Tomatoes score? Which is higher, the critic score or the audience score?
So this is a good last question because I think it actually dovetails into my general thoughts of the movie. I'm going to say that the audience score is higher.
Hey, going out on a high note, that is correct.
Okay.
The audience score of this film is 65%. The critic rating is 60%.
Okay. And the
I
reason
don't
that
know
I
what
said
movie
that
they were watching, but okay.
so the reason I said that the audience score would be higher, I think that there are good movies, there are bad movies, and there are movies that are somewhere in the middle. And in the middle, there are good bad movies and there are bad good movies. I think this is very much a good bad movie. It is a movie that has some positives to it.
Sure.
It has a lot of negatives if you pay any attention or know anything about how drafts work.
Or how the sport of football works.
Correct, yes. So I will say, on the positive notes, I think that most, not all, but most of the acting performances are pretty good. I think that it's fun to see all of the kind of celebrity cameos that come in, especially if you're a sports fan.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't love seeing Roger Goodell, man?
There are some moments where it's like it's not a hilarious movie, but there are moments that are like kind of funny. There are like good kind of one-liners the characters say.
Yeah, there's definitely a few good ones.
That said, and you can agree with me or disagree with me, but I feel like I know we're going to go with this. This movie has one of the most nonsensical plots I've ever seen in a movie. The flaws are plentiful with this, just the general story of how this movie is written.
It doesn't, and I think we each have this sentiment to each other. I will agree with your sentiment because and the screenplay, which I mean, you know, slightly accomplished guy writing the screenplay, you could say, I guess, right?
So one thing that I found crazy looking about this is that this was like on like the Hollywood blacklist. Like this was like a hot screenplay that people were like bidding on, and it was like really anticipated. And I, for the life of me, don't understand why. Like I think this movie kind of turned out about as good as it could have, given how nonsensical it is.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at you know this movie, and if this was really the main kind of like the idea behind it, like I'm assuming it just had to be hot because people are like, oh, it's a new look at an NFL movie, and football's super popular, especially in the U.S. Like, you know, obviously American football, if we're going to be, to all our
Sure.
international listeners who I'm sure are super into this, but I don't, I don't get it because to me it's written like it seems like it's written by a couple of high school kids. They're like, this would be funny, or like this is how I imagine adult conversations happen. Like the way they talk to each other is not like the dialogue to me just didn't even seem in a lot of cases you're like what.
Yeah, I feel like
Eh,
one
eh,
of the things that probably helped get this movie made was the success of Moneyball, which is, of course, a movie that's about
probably.
like a front office operating. And there are a lot of things that you could criticize about that movie in terms of, is this actually the way that trades work? Is it actually like a general manager just like rapidly calling guys and just like, kind of shouting out random names and trying to get guys? And probably not, but it's in service of the movie. Like probably less
Correct.
in 2002 than today, but like you would like, even though it would be much more realistic, for instance, in draft day for the characters to be like sending text messages, then calling each other all the time, 2014,
Yeah.
especially for like early parts of the conversation. I get why, for the sake of a movie, you don't want to do that. It's pretty boring to watch people texting.
Yeah, and
But
that's how you introduce the characters. I mean, when they're not
yeah,
together, they have to be on the phone. I get that.
yeah, and that's kind of like, this is like a very talking movie kind of by necessity. But the characters, like, I think that when it comes to writing the dialogue in this movie, and we can probably get to like kind of going, down the, kind of, the TikTok of the plot, but
Yeah,
the characters have sort of a little bit of that like Aaron Sorkin Moneyball kind of like edge, but it's not they're not that clever. And if you spend any time kind of critically analyzing the way these things go, it just completely breaks down. This is a movie that I've watched a few times in my life. The less I've paid attention to them, the more I enjoyed it.
yeah,
So I watched this movie twice in the last week. It's currently streaming on Peacock for anyone who
yeah.
has not seen it. But the first time I watched it, I paused a lot. I was just taking notes. Let me see what my word count is. 5,286 words on my Word document of notes of mostly complaints about this movie. Um, and watching it that way and thinking about every moment of it just drove me nuts, to a point where I was like, I need to watch this movie again and just find some level of enjoyment of it, which I did. And
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're maybe, like you were saying, I think like cursed by some of the knowledge. Like if you just look at it as I mean, it's not a very long movie either. Like I think the
yeah, it's like
total
two
runtime of
hours.
credits is like an hour 50. So it's like it's not, like you pop it on, you can have some fun with it. If you allow yourself to get invested in the story, like you're gonna leave being like, that was fun. But yeah, I was like you. I've watched it twice in the last 2 days or the 2 days preceding this recording. I did it the opposite the first time. I hadn't seen it in a while, so I just wanted to watch it and not think about taking notes. And then the second time I was watching notes, and I had to stop it halfway through and take a break before I went back and finish it.
Yeah, it's much more enjoyable to not think about it as much as we have. But I think that is kind of, and that is, like I said, that's why I thought the critic score was going to be lower than the audience score. And the thing that makes it difficult, though, is on one hand, if you have a lot of knowledge about football, you have a lot of knowledge about sports, which, I mean, we're not professionals. Neither one of us considers the NFL our like number one favorite sport. But like, I think we're, not to toot our own horns, we're above average in terms of our kind of knowledge of it.
I would
If
agree.
you know your stuff, though, you're going to be driven crazy by it. But there's also so much like minutia involved, and how much like specific draft picks are worth, and kind of the mechanics of the draft, that if you're not a sports fan, you're just going to be like bewildered by it. It's just incredibly confusing. And like, part of
Yeah,
the reason that I'm sure this didn't do well in Europe, like, it's one thing that the NFL isn't super popular, but like there aren't as many like hardcore fans who are like caring about the draft. There are plenty of people in
yeah,
Europe who are like, I know who Tom Brady and Manning are, but I'm not following, the salary cap machinations.
yeah.
Which luckily, neither does the salary cap expert in this movie. So there is that. Um, so the first scene of this movie, it shows a clock that's ticking down. It shows that we're just under 13 hours away from the start of the NFL draft. Most of this movie will end up taking place on a single day. There's one very quick scene at the very end that takes place months later, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
The first voice we hear in the entire movie is Chris Berman's voice,
Ah,
which is extremely recognizable. I thought Berman was okay in this movie. I don't think that he is,
yeah,
like, he can be, like, he's a guy who, like, kind of almost by nature of his bits can be pretty annoying, but yeah, he's
he was he wasn't misrepresented or anything, and it wasn't like he wasn't made out to be. He was Chris Berman. Now, in his opening monologue, I think there is one part that I'm sure, and to be fair, I'm sure they wrote this for him. He didn't write his own stuff. That didn't make sense. It's the draft is over 3 days, and he says 224 men today will become members of the NFL. And it's like, no, over the next 3 days they will, but
which is wrong on several levels, because one, there's not actually 224 picks because there's bonus picks. Two, it's not all today. Three, they have to sign contracts, but whatever.
Four, they could be cut still, even if they sign a contract. They could not make the team.
And yeah, but that is also the kind of thing that happens on NFL broadcasts on ESPN or on NFL Network, which both crews get a lot of emphasis here. So I'm not really too mad about that. So the first scene we get from an actual character within the movie, because Chris Berman's playing himself, the GM for the Seahawks receives a phone call. So they have the top. So the Seattle Seahawks have the top overall pick, which at the time that this movie was released, the Seattle Seahawks were the defending Super Bowl champions. So that is one of the kind of recurring things. This especially happens with the Cleveland Browns stuff. Is it's kind of hard to know, what universe the movie's taking place in. Is this supposed to be the actual NFL? Because one, Seattle wouldn't have the number 1 overall pick or anywhere close. Two, they already have a really good quarterback, that went to the same school as the prospective number 1 quarterback in this movie. Further adds to the complications of it. See, I'm willing to accept that, the premise that this is a totally fictional universe in terms of the players and the personnel. But they also specifically reference the Washington St. Louis Robert Griffith III trade, which will also come back up later in this movie.
It certainly will.
Yeah. So the GM is Tom Michaels, and we will kind of get to know him a little bit. He's the most prominent character that is an employee of a different NFL team. And so the other guy that he's talking to, and he talks to a few times in the movie, who is the black gentleman.
Yeah, Chi McBride. Great character actor.
So according to the Wikipedia page for this movie, that's supposed to be the owner. But I don't see a single mention of it in the movie or anything that would suggest that he's the owner rather than an assistant GM. It just was confusing what he was supposed to be.
Well, the only thing that would make it, at least that made it to me seem like that I assumed he was the owner, is that he's sort of giving him orders. And maybe it's more the second scene we see him in that we'll talk about later when Sonny calls him back. And the words that he says to him, that makes it to me seem like that's not something an assistant GM would say. That's more of, I'm your boss, do this.
That's fair. Maybe it's just because the way that character acts is so much different than how Cleveland's owner, played by Frank Langella, acts throughout the movie. But that could also just be,
it's very akin to kind of, I don't know, the same actor. I doubt you were a fan of the television show House MD, but he plays a role in that show where he's a guy who kind of comes in, gives a big donation, and then he's like, make me chairman of your board and let me just start making decisions and throw my weight and money around. And he gives off those very kind of similar vibes in this movie. I did want to ask you one thing. It comes up more throughout the movie, but the first time we see it is obviously here. Is what are your feelings on the transitions they do where it's Seattle and they do the flyover shot to the stadium and it says home of the, and then says the team name this, Seattle, and then they fly to, I don't even know, is it Qualcomm? Is that the stadium? I don't even know. But
Seattle is probably Quest Field at that point.
Or Quest, yeah.
Because Qualcomm was San Diego.
San Diego, yeah. So, and it's home of the Seahawks, which the font, whenever they put the NFL team names up, half the colors just didn't quite look 100% right to me. If you're working with the NFL, just put the dang logo up. I didn't understand it, but it was weird to me. And they do that to every city they visit. And there's no rhyme or reason hardly to it. But
Yeah, it was weird. I can't say that it's a thing that I spend a lot of time fixating on, but it was almost a little bit patronizing too because it was a very like loud kind of like smash zoom kind of thing.
Yeah. It
But
just like by
again, I
the
have
third time it happened, I'm like, ah, here we go again doing this. Like,
yeah. Yeah, and the fact that I have 9 pages of notes and didn't bring that up should probably be a reflection on
see,
some of
I
my
have a feeling that
thoughts.
we both have like probably fixated on different things. So this conversation could go on for a very, very long time.
Yeah. So the guy that we're presuming is the owner of Seattle. It doesn't really matter what he is. It's just a little bit confusing. That
Yeah.
also it's interesting that in this version of the NFL 10 years ago, they have a black owner, which the NFL has never actually had. Um, might be a thing they want to look into, but this movie does a lot of there's a lot of pretty glowing view of how the NFL runs in this film. So, but
Hmm.
anyway, the owner says, "Who's the most desperate guy you know?" Which is not a thing you once said about you, probably. And then we immediately cut to Cleveland.
Which the other thing too, it's like, who decides all of a sudden 12 hours before the draft to be like, you know what? Let's try to shop the top overall pick now. Like, and to be fair, we don't know if this hadn't been happening, but the way the GM that Tom kind of sees I'm almost led to believe that they were fixated on taking Bo Callahan. So
Yeah, like I'm extremely unclear about like why Seattle wants to move the pick. Like obviously they do talk about how they specifically want to get like a big haul, which is why the Washington St. Louis trade comes
yeah,
up is because they're specifically like, let's see if we can go big.
yeah,
Again, you might want to, and they reference making other calls after they make the Cleveland call, but again, didn't have to wait until draft day. There are many more moments to come in which a character very clearly has not been doing their job for like several months, and it just so happens that draft day is like when they've like emerged from a coma and they're just catching
yeah,
up on all of their stuff.
yeah.
Kevin Costner, who is the star of this movie, shows up next. He's watching ESPN at his home. John Gruden is gushing about Bo Callahan, who is the defending Heisman Trophy winner out of the University of Wisconsin. Behind Kevin Costner's bed, and I'm mostly going to refer to him as Kevin Costner. His character's name is Sonny Weaver Jr., but it doesn't really matter. You're going to spend the whole time just saying, "Oh, it's Kevin Costner."
Hmm.
So behind his bed, there is like a picture or a painting of a chessboard. Um, this is like the rat at the end of the Departed level of subtlety, I think. But yeah, it symbolizes obviousness.
Yeah.
So Gruden says that the Heisman Trophy winner Callahan is the best quarterback to come into the draft since Andrew Luck, who was drafted 2 years before this. So I mean, that's cool, I guess, but I guess they're saying he's better than EJ Manuel was the year before.
Which, hey,
2013 was a notoriously bad quarterback draft. Like Geno Smith's giving them a little bit of redemption, but it was EJ Manuel who was the top guy picked. It was not
yeah,
great. Um, yeah, so there is a little bit of a kind of a questioning of scale about Bo Callahan throughout this movie of whether this guy is considered like a good number one quarterback or whether this guy is considered like an elite prospect. Like, is this guy Peyton Manning or is this guy Matt Stafford? I'm really not sure.
yeah, yeah. And
So
obviously, we'll get more into that as that's a big crux of this movie going forward. But
yeah, so the next voice that we see on the TV is Mel Kiper Jr., who's obviously synonymous with the draft. He mentions, uh, somewhat coincidentally, I guess, that Cleveland has the number 7 pick. They don't mention anyone 2 through 6, but he mentioned Cleveland. Um, turns out that Sonny Weaver Jr. is having a bit of a difficult week. And one of the reasons is because his dad, who was, I guess, in this universe, the longtime coach of the Browns, just died the week before. And this is another one of those things where the movie kind of wants to, have its cake and eat it too, where they want to sort of drive home that Sonny Weaver Sr. is like a Browns and NFL legend, but they also want to maintain that Cleveland is starving for a championship. Like you could draw a parallel between Weaver Sr. and like Paul Brown or somebody, or you could say that he's the equivalent of like some other legendary coach in some other city. You could say he's Chuck Noll or Tom Landry or Don Shula or whatever. But like
Yeah.
all those guys won championships, and like
Right.
to this day, their franchises aren't considered disasters because of those championships. So I guess where I overall land on is that Cleveland is the disaster they are in real life, but that they're considered like competent. They would be like what you would consider maybe like pre 2004 Boston Red Sox, where like they're at least they're not winning, but they're competing, and they aren't viewed of as like
I
a
mean,
joke.
could be Cleveland. It could be the Cleveland Browns last year. Like, you know, a competing team at least. You know, but yeah. I mean, obviously, there's the long title droughts or whatever, but but I think
Yeah,
too, though, that just goes to the general, and we'll see it with at least another fan base, like NFL fan bases. Like, I know that there's some that are seen as more kind of crazy, so but like, and sports fans in general are so quick and crazy, and the people they start to look at are the coach and the GM. That's the heads they start calling for if they're not winning and
sure,
stuff.
yeah,
So, you know, but you know, kind of funny too in general that they're like, oh, you know what? Let's talk about the number 7 pick, and
yeah. I'm
on
trying to rationalize that as because of the whole like what Sonny Weaver Jr. thinking because of this emotional
yeah,
week, but at the same time, like if there was like the father of a current NFL GM had died last week. I mean, granted, probably doesn't somebody that has the stature in the NFL as Weaver Senior. I probably wouldn't have heard about it. It probably just wouldn't be a thing that was like on my mind.
yeah, unless you just like saw an official like tweet from their team's Twitter account or something that said our thoughts and prayers are with our GM after the passing of his father or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, and
So
I'd be like, oh, that's sad. Okay, like, because the other thing too, it's like, yes, and this is a thing in general that we'll probably use, but it's like the amount of power that the individual GM just has in this movie. It's not as if there's not a massive team of people around them.
yeah, they're basically like military dictators in this movie. Like, and
So it's
I'm
like
gonna have a
I'm like, I get it. He has the final say, but technically the owner could probably come in and say, no, you're doing this because I own the team and I own you. But
yeah. I'm gonna have a lot of criticisms about Sonny Weaver Jr. as a general manager, but there's gonna be another GM that comes up that is like unquestionably worse at his job. This is not a movie in which GMs look very smart.
yeah, yeah. As you get into the second half of this movie, you're just like, I could be an NFL GM based on this movie.
Yeah. So the next thing that comes up in the movie is they cut to Deion Sanders, who I think may have been on NFL Network, but regardless, Deion Sanders is on the TV. So that's
Which prime?
2023 Sports Person of the Year, according to Sports Illustrated. For some reason, Deion Sanders is high up Ray Jennings, who is the running back out of Florida State. For some reason, nobody gives him any grief about the fact that Deion Sanders, who very famously went to Florida State, is like, pumping up the FSU guy, but whatever.
Yeah.
Ray Jennings was a Heisman finalist. He is portrayed by Arian Foster. Not to get too far ahead of this character, because he's not a huge character in the movie, but he's not a great actor. But
No, but luckily they don't give him much to do.
correct. There is There's an actor that I have more grievance with than Arian Foster, and we'll hold off on that one though for now. So Dion, whenever he's explaining Ray Jennings, he mentions that he's a Heisman Trophy finalist, and like very quickly kind of does like a yada yada, passing off that Jennings got into quote a little skirmish, in which he was charged with assault and battery and landed someone in the hospital. Out of curiosity, Jason, can you remember any other running backs, perhaps running backs named Ray, who had batteries in 2014 that perhaps were not so quickly sort of yada yada and in fact led to like a major national scandal?
I mean, I don't know. It's just got a lot of ups and downs, like an elevator, John. I can't really think of anybody.
I wasn't going to make a joke about it, but yeah. So Ray
Yes, it's
Rice,
definitely, yeah, it's definitely, it parallels the Ray Rice thing. Um,
and like I'm not
Difference
even
being that
saying
Ray
that.
Rice was he was at least an established running back at this point. He wasn't
Yeah, and I think
like
one of the big things with Ray,
if the Ray Rice thing surfaces and he's a prospect for the draft, nobody's touching him with a 10-foot pole, probably. Like,
well, and I think that there is a big difference, which is that Ray Rice, like there was film of it, so people
oh
like
yeah,
kind of couldn't just look past it. And with Ray Jennings, we're led to believe that there's not any film, but like it gets discussed at the very least. Like this becomes like a major like character. Like the NFL draft complex is completely insane when it comes to evaluating character, quote unquote. You know, this is the place where Des
over
Bryant was
evaluating character.
yeah, this is the place where like Des Bryant was asked if his mom was a prostitute during the combine. Like this is an insane place, and we're supposed to just be like, "Hey, was charged with assault and battery. Someone's in the hospital. That's nothing. It's not a big deal. Like,
But
what is
look at
going
him
on?"
play football.
Yeah, and at no point do we have anything even resembling a reckoning of like the morality of this. And again, like maybe you can justify it, but you have to at least think about it. You have to put some sort of thought into what's going on, and they just nobody does at all.
Yeah, and it's a thing that happens because I mean, was it this last year or the year before in the NHL draft there was a kid with some allegations
Yeah.
um, that
Well, he
was a
ended up
high
not signing,
talent guy
right?
but dropped. What?
He ended up not signing, right? Like they such backlash that they just like
Yeah, he was drafted, much later than his talent had, but then basically the team's like, yeah, no, we're not going to extend you a contract because and that was a little different. This is just appeared to just be men fighting his situation in an assault.
yeah.
I believe this guy's was an essay, a much bigger subject. And to be fair, this movie's take place for the 2014 NFL draft, not the. I think if somebody even had just a regular assault case in the 2024 NFL draft, we'd have a lot bigger discussion around than even in 2014.
Yeah, I mean that is true. But I think that even with this being, assault where like you could think about like, Randy Moss or somebody like that where like him being involved in like a skirmish like years before, or like Allen Iverson with when he went to like jail for a while when he was in high school. These things were a decade or two
Yeah.
decades before this movie.
Well, yeah, and but at the same time, like you said, these things that were happening, it wasn't like Iverson got out of prison and they're like, all right, and with the next pick in the draft we take, like, you know, he went, he went to college and Moss obviously had his whole ordeal, but then kept his nose clean at Marshall. And if you want to go back to an episode where we talked quite a bit about Randy Moss in one of our early draft day episodes, so
1998 NFL, yeah, and but even during that draft though, part of the like he was considered to be falling during the draft because of off
yeah,
the field stuff. And this isn't even like covering the fact that this is a running back who's being considered as like a very top pick in the draft, which is doesn't never happen, but it's not common. Certainly the fact that he's a Heisman Trophy finalist is not going to be considered like, oh, well, he has to be like a top 10 pick or
yeah.
whatever.
I mean, insert
Like,
Alabama running back here, like
yeah. Well, I mean, and also the Cleveland Browns selected Trent Richardson about 2 years before this.
Yep.
Yeah, which
He had
again,
completely busted at that point, but
yeah, which again kind of falls into the what universe are we talking about here? And sort of an aside, but the Seattle GM has a picture of like the Legion of Boom behind him in his office, which implies that the Legion of Boom exists in this universe with the Seattle Seahawks, and they have the number one overall draft pick.
yeah. Yeah, with that defense, like even if you're on your third string quarterback, you're going to be in games probably.
Yes. We have yet to introduce the number two character in this movie, and we're already getting very angry. So we should probably, since it's the next thing
Yeah.
that happens in the movie, talk about that. So Jennifer Garner walks down the staircase. This is an extremely like modern looking house. Apparently Sonny's doing quite well for himself. It kind of gave me like almost like a creeped out vibe. It kind of reminded me of Neil Patrick Harris's Vacation Home Gone Girl, which is like it's a little too clean. It's a little too pristine. I don't
Yeah.
believe that
It
Sonny
looks
Weaver
like the
Jr. deserves.
guy. Sorry, go ahead, finish.
I don't believe that Sonny Weaver Jr. deserves to meet the same end as Neil Patrick Harris in Gone Girl, but it does put me on edge a little bit.
Yeah, but I agree that it looks that way, but at the same time, like the only thing you see the guy like touch, in his house basically is like his coffee machine, his coffee cup. Maybe strikes me as a dude that's been living at the office. Maybe probably hire someone to clean the house for him because
Yeah,
he he looks like he's got money.
that's fair. I will point out that Tom Michaels, Seattle GM, was sleeping at the office, and Sonny is coming to work much later, even though he's 3 time zones ahead of Seattle. But that's okay. So Jennifer Garner comes down, and immediately a big theme of this movie is established, which is that Kevin Costner and Jennifer Garner are both like decent enough actors. They have no chemistry. There is nothing, and like I cannot overstate for anyone who hasn't seen the movie how much chemistry they do not have. I have never been there are no two characters in movie history that I have a harder time imagining have ever had sex, which is incredible because the next thing that comes up is that Jennifer Garner is pregnant.
Aren't you gonna say anything?
Yeah, it becomes very clear here that Jennifer Garner, just generally speaking, wants some sort of like emotional response from Sonny, and Sonny just does not provide it. Again, absolutely no chemistry between these two. Uh, I seem to remember a decent amount of criticism toward Jennifer Garner's performance in this movie. I don't know that this performance can be saved. I don't think it's Jennifer Garner's fault. I think that it is a terribly written part.
Yeah, I get torn because I agree. Her dialogue, when she's supposed to have, especially the dramatic kind of discussion scenes with Kevin Costner, the dialogue is like, who talks like that? And like you see the moments, and we'll see them later. But she has moments when she's just kind of like almost reactionary. It's not so scripted, kind of a thing. When you're like, okay, I can see where she's not just a stiff actress, and maybe it's just the character that Reitman, how he wanted her character Allie to be. Um, you know, as we'll come to learn, obviously, this relationship is even more problematic. Not just because she's some woman he's impregnated; she works for him.
Yeah, so this is not expressly brought up in the first scene, though if you look closely, she does have a Cleveland Browns like decal, like look like a parking
Oh,
thing on her car.
and when she goes to leave, she says, "I have to go home before I go to the office."
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember. I think I knew the basic beats of this plot whenever I first saw the movie. I guess you could credibly be like, she needs to go to her office, he needs to go to his office. But so here's the thing about Sonny Weaver Jr. and Allie, they are both getting fired immediately. I think that is the single biggest plot hole in this movie, and there are many of them. There's no way you're getting around this. They have a secret relationship in which the general manager of the team has clearly impregnated his subordinate. There's really no way around the fact that even though she is like an executive with the team, she is like working under him. They haven't disclosed their
Oh,
relationship.
she was working under him, all right. Sorry.
Well,
You set me up for that one.
Again, I cannot imagine it, but despite the, I know how biology works, but I just can't believe it. So yeah, that is a whole bag of worms of the fact that these two.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is too, she works for the team, and works with the salary cap, so going to be pretty close with the GM in some cases.
Yeah,
obviously. How, like, I get it. Like, I have 2 children, and both times that my wife has been pregnant, like, she told me, like, the same day. Like, one time I was home and she just happened to take it and I heard her freaking out. The other time, she told me when she got home from work with our first child. If she knows it's the first day of the draft and that thing's going to be happening, like, could this news have not waited 3 days?
It's not entirely clear for sure that she just said it like the day before, but she definitely said it that week, which again is also the week that his dad died. Like, just wait until the Sunday. It's like, I understand that having a child is a big moment in one's life. You don't have to say it immediately if it's going to cause like actual like problems in your life.
And also, to be fair, at least at this point in the movie, to me it feels very clear that neither one of them particularly are happy that she's pregnant either.
Correct. Yes.
There's,
well, the thing is, it's a little hard to tell exactly.
Yeah, is it a shock?
They're not happy about it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that it's unplanned, but there is kind of this issue of like, are these people like? Again, they have no chemistry. There's very little indication until the very end of the movie that they would even like hold hands or something like fairly minor like that. They are just totally, and I get why if you're at work, you're not like, even if you're in a like completely clear with HR kind of relationship at work, you're not exactly going to be like, expressing PDA or whatever, but there's just nothing here. And it becomes, and like their awkwardness makes me also like Kevin Costner's character less, because he is just kind of being like vaguely unpleasant. One other thing that happens while they're at the house is Kevin Costner writes down something on a green piece of paper and he puts it in his pocket. This will, for reasons that will remain unclear, what is answered eventually was on here. Does not really make sense of why he did on it at all.
Yeah. But when you find out what it is, you're like, why did we go through this entire movie? But we'll get to that point.
So as Jennifer Garner and Kevin Costner are talking while she's like in her car getting ready to leave, Kevin Costner gets a phone call, which he ends up taking, which Jennifer Garner looks frustrated that he's taking it. Again, this is draft day. She works there. She has to know that like this is a pretty important day for him. Like, if he's doing this the day after the draft, I can see being annoyed, but like,
yeah.
And also, like, the only defining characteristic that we'll eventually learn about this character and her personality is that she really loves football. Like, they drive the point home in frankly obnoxious ways, but they do drive it home.
Yeah.
But anyway, Kevin Costner picks up the phone. It is Tom, our friend, the Seattle GM. He very casually just says he's sitting there eating his pancakes, and yes, the fact that he's eating his pancakes will come up. He says he's, quote, thinking about moving number one. It is very clear that this is the first conversation they've had about the number one overall pick. And that conversation, again, there's no way that it would be happening on the day of the draft. It also wouldn't be happening probably on a phone call. It would be like, text, email, whatever. But regardless, I get why, for the sake of the movie, it has to be done on the phone. I don't understand why Kevin Costner has to be doing all the thinking while he's driving. Why it can't be like surely you have like a laptop at your house. You can go in if you're considering what's surely going to be a big trade.
Yeah,
He's just driving along. I mean, he's on Bluetooth, so it's not.
He's being safe,
reasonably so. But like, he's not being safe with his job, though. He's clearly not focusing fully on that.
Well, no, he's.
Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, he's sitting there, and then I guess what Tom then makes the offer, which is
the offer is two. So the number one pick that the Browns have this year, which is number 7, which we've established, their first round pick next year, and then a third round pick the year after that, which is mostly a fair trade.
Yeah, it's moved 6 spots.
Yeah. But I mean, that's 6 pretty big spots, though, if you're getting the number one overall pick.
Agreed.
But again, probably not a trade that you're bringing up 12 hours before the draft or whatever it is at this point.
No.
So Tom says that Connors, who I guess is their quarterback in this universe, did a great job for him last year. Not sure how they got the number one overall pick, though. Like, maybe like with this draft, it was because of a prior trade. It wasn't Justin Fields' fault that they got the number one overall pick. That was because Carolina was bad. Sonny does decline the trade, which is probably not a bad idea because it doesn't seem like he's like given any thought to Bo Callahan. It doesn't seem like the Browns have any information about Bo Callahan that couldn't be figured out by like watching ESPN for half an hour.
Yeah, they admit to as much later, but
yes. So Kevin Costner mentions that he has a quarterback because he mentions Brian Drew. Tom scoffs about this because Brian Drew, quote, barely made it through half the season before getting injured last year. Which, one, quarterbacks get hurt all the time. So I'm not really it seems like a really weird critique, but also Cleveland seemingly was better than Seattle the year before because Seattle has the number one overall pick.
And I think he states that he was 5-1 before he got hurt. My guess is that Seattle did not have 5 wins the entire season if they have the number one overall pick.
Probably not. Well, especially if they're like completely sold on, if they keep the pick, taking Bo Callahan.
Right.
So Tom frames this trade as that if Sonny trades for the number one pick, he gets to save football in Cleveland. Why? Are we supposed to believe that this is a franchise that is like in limbo? Because like in real life, I mean, obviously Cleveland, the Browns relocated after 1995, but like, despite the fact that they haven't generally been that successful in recent years, they still have pretty good fan support. Are we supposed to believe that they are like, they need to be saved more than the team that has the number one overall draft pick does? Luckily, the good news is that Sonny has like the one like smart move he makes this whole time, which is that Tom gives Sonny an ultimatum of 10 seconds, which is funny because Sonny already said no. But Sonny says, "Enjoy pancakes, Tom," and he hangs up. And with that moment, Sonny Weaver Jr. has made the only sensible decision. They will go on to have the number 7 overall pick, and all is fine. And this movie, no, this movie's going to get so much dumber.
Yeah. That's like the one like believable conversation. And it's like, all right, I'll listen. Nah, it's too much. Talk to you later.
I don't believe that the conversation would happen at that time. I can buy the conversation happening like a month or two prior,
I
but the
agree.
structure of the conversation does make sense. All right, we now
Yeah.
cut to a scene that I hate more.
It's so
Again, I don't
great.
even hate. So we're gonna cut to so there's a sports radio host that is talking while Sonny is driving to work. And the Cleveland radio. So presumably this is a local Cleveland sports talk show, right? Like we don't think that this is like a national show that just happens to be talking about Cleveland.
No, it seems to be a local show.
Yeah. So the host says, "We don't have beautiful beaches and weather and sunshine and hot babes roller skating all over." You're talking to people in Cleveland. They know what Cleveland is. Like, why are you summing up like the shortcomings or the lack of glamour of this city?
It's
Also, 2 years after this movie was made, a different Midwestern city with insane sports fans lost his team to a city that it certainly seems like he's driving, as far as like hot babes roller skating, but whole other topic. The host uses the phrase "let me explain to you," as though the people listening are not like familiar with Cleveland Browns football. He says that football was invented 20 miles down the road in Canton, Ohio. One, that's definitely not true.
not true.
That's where pro football was founded, I believe. But like the first many football games were played on the East Coast. But also, if it were true, which it's not, but if it were true, wouldn't the entire that's within the listener radius? Everybody would know that. Why did the people of Cleveland have to be told that pro football was invented in like the Cleveland area?
It's this like I from a storytelling perspective, I guess you're trying to paint the picture of Cleveland, but
Yeah,
people know geographically where Cleveland is.
yeah. I get it from a perspective of setting the stage for the audience, but from a pure like logical standpoint, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
Also,
I
it
mean, if I
drives me
had a
nuts.
local guy,
Also, it drives me nuts that he says football is invented 20 miles down the road in Canton, Ohio. I guarantee you, every single person listening in Cleveland knows what state Canton's in. Like, why? What? Okay.
yeah, that'd be like you saying, it was even if it was in a different state, like if something was invented in one of the towns in Illinois that's close to St. Louis, it's 30 miles down the road in blah 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 Illinois.
Yeah, like
Like
you
people
heard
would
about this?
know, people know, unless it's like a city that isn't both. Like, but is there a Canton, Indiana within 20 miles of Ohio?
Yeah. To
Probably
go
not.
with an incredibly little reference, have you heard about this big ketchup bottle in Collinsville, Illinois? One, you probably have. Two, if you haven't, you've probably at least heard of Collinsville. Three, if you haven't heard of Collinsville either, this anecdote probably means nothing to you.
I mean, I'll give you that, but the big ketchup bottle in Collinsville, like, it was a cheap way to be like, hey, we could show a shot of the Pro Football Hall of Fame real quick.
Yes, that
Which
is true.
that's the thing. Like, don't if you're gonna say it, just say what you want to should be like. We have the Pro Football Hall of Fame 20 miles away in Canton. I have way less problem with a radio host saying that because
At
that's
the very
something
least,
that
you're not
somebody who's
lying.
that's somebody who's a passionate fan would say. Some of these local sports guys aren't as judicious at times and get passionate. Now, in a
Yeah,
major city like Cleveland, I can't speak to it because I've never been to the state of Ohio like staying over that I can remember. So I don't know what the local radio scene is like there, the local sports radio scene, but it's like we get it. There's pressure on Sonny, and that's essentially what they're all trying to build up. It's like he's got to do something, and he just turned down the opportunity to do something.
Yeah, and we should note that the sports radio hosts who will come back, don't you worry, they will come back,
Oh, they
are
will.
clearly agitated with Sonny.
100%.
Like by the end, they're like almost threatening him. Is the line do something Sonny or you will pay or you will be out of here? It is like weirdly hostile.
Well, and it's like, yeah, I mean, to say it like that, it's like, first of all, your opinion doesn't matter to Sonny's boss. Like,
Right.
it now in general, if there's just a, I don't know, and we'll get to Frank Langella in a little bit, but he is a guy who definitely appears to give into perception more than.
Yeah. And I
And
will
I don't know
say,
NFL owners enough to know if that's really the case. I feel like most of the owners are like, all right, GM, you run the team, I'll collect the money.
yeah,
Like the Mark Cubans of the world, which obviously he's not even a majority owner anymore. But like those types of guys who are very invested in their teams and the actual sport just don't exist, or they're few and far between.
yeah, and I will say in general, it seems like people in this film's universe care a lot about public perception. So I guess I can buy that as like a proxy. I'll
Yeah,
drop that complaint because there are others. On the bright side, though, the radio hosts are done for now. So Sonny gets a call from Vontae Mack, who is also driving. He's played by Chadwick Boseman, who
with small children in the back seat.
he, he sure does have small. They're not his children, so
Yeah,
there's that.
there's his nephews, I believe, is.
They're his nephews, yeah. So Chadwick Boseman, kind of an interesting casting here. One because Chadwick Boseman's 37 years old in this movie, like when this movie was made. I can
He
buy him
looks
being
great.
younger than. I could buy him being younger than 37. I cannot buy him being like 22. I he looks way old. Like he's older than the actor who plays Brian Drew, who is like
An
his
8-year
entire
veteran.
purpose in the movie. His entire purpose in the movie is to be the old guy. So that part gets a little tricky, but and Chadwick Boseman like would become more famous than he was at this point. This is like pre like Black Panther. It's pre him,
Yeah, yeah.
being
On
nominated
the
for
up and up,
Oscars.
though, coming off of 42.
Yeah, like I would say that they probably didn't need to get an actor of Boseman's level of fame for this part. Glad they did though, because it like especially knowing that Chadwick Boseman very sadly gone too soon. But
Yeah.
and I think that there is sort of a like lore about any of his performances, but he's good in this movie. Like there
He
are
is.
problems with the casting, there are problems with the character, but his performance is good.
Agreed. I think there's a few things that are head scratching even in this conversation. Like, and I'll be honest, I don't know how this would actually go. Sonny gets this call from Vontae Mack, and it's him to basically lobby to be picked at number 7.
Yes.
To me, very much seems like something, and I think even Kevin Costner says something, but it's something an agent would do to check in with the GM, not so much a 21, 22-year-old kid.
Yeah. I think that it's probably not a thing that necessarily hurt him in Kevin Costner's eyes, but it was confusing.
Well, and
They do brief. Go ahead.
no, and I think it's, his character and his reasoning for do it. This is something I found confusing. It's not on Chadwick Boseman, like you said, but it's like he's a guy who's calling, and he's a pass rusher is his position. He's a pass rushing linebacker, is kind of how he's touted and built up throughout the movie. And they're like, hey man, if you don't take me at 6, I might slide like into the late teens or early 20s.
Yeah, and like he's clearly worried about his draft position. I'd say that generally speaking, most of what's being discussed in like most of the players here don't really have that much reason to be that concerned with where they get drafted because if Vontae Mack falls to late in the first round, if Bo Callahan is drafted somewhere other than 1, if Ray Jennings, falls out of the top half of the first and slides a little bit, they're still going to get paid like a pretty good amount. It's not like this is like my one chance. Like the dramatic stakes are kind of for the teams, but they really do sell on the players, which, like frankly, Chadwick Boseman gives a better performance than either of the GMs that we get to know in this movie. So probably for the best. So I kind of referenced this before, but the fact that Bo Callahan is a quarterback at Wisconsin, at one point reference him being from Washington, which I guess would make sense that Seattle might have like an extra motivation to get him. Why did they choose him to play at Wisconsin? So if you know anything, like Wisconsin is pretty famously a very run-heavy team. They're a team that at this point, like Monty Ball was there, and like Melvin Gordon would come not too long after, Jonathan Taylor, a little bit after. Like they're very much a run-focused team. And while I'm willing to suspend the belief of it for the sake of this movie that this was more of like a spread offense, why didn't they just choose a different school? It doesn't matter. Like they could have said he went anywhere. Like, you could have said that he went to Alabama. You could have said he went to Texas. What difference does it make?
It could have been a rights thing. Who knows?
Yeah.
If they had to pay for rights, but it's like Vontae went to Ohio State, I think, right? Like,
yeah,
and we'll hear, and then obviously we already talked about what Ray went to Florida State, so it's not like I don't know if it's.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what it would be, but it feels like so. For instance, so for the Florida State clip where they show Ray Jennings, whenever Deion Sanders is talking about him, they show him in a game against what looks like Clemson. Just have Bo Callahan be from Clemson. I'm fine with that. Like, you clearly had the rights to it. Also, I'm not sure how much this drove you nuts, but the game footage from college, they get to it later.
Game.
It's awful. It is so bad. I don't know how it's so bad either. Like, I can't tell what exactly they're doing, but like the players don't look like they're the right sizes. Like the whole
It's like just do what you did earlier in the film where they very clearly just took like somebody else's highlight tape and it's like fuzzy enough to where you can't read the name on the back and it's just a random college football highlight.
yeah, like the Chadwick Boseman thing is especially interesting because Chadwick Boseman was not a particularly large man, and I think that whenever they're discussing Vontae Mack, they are kind of discussing him as being a little bit undersized, but that they're okay with it because he's fast. Which obviously Chadwick Boseman probably was not like NFL caliber speedster, but like you can teach yourself that for the sake of the movie. But like when they show him in clips, he looks like he's like he looks enormous. Like he looks like he has this huge like ad shelf. He looks like he's like a
Ray
standard.
Lewis.
Yeah, he looks like Ray Lewis, which he decidedly is not. And again, it's just strange. Yeah. At one point, Chadwick Boseman mentions that he's taking his nephews to go tumbling at a gym. He says that unlike nephews, he doesn't like tumbling. You see, because it's the draft, and he'd be fall.
He doesn't want to fall. But this is the thing to me. He's doing this pitch hard. Like to me, when he's trying to sell himself, he should be selling. I'm the right guy to take. I'm the best player. If I fall to you, that you need to take it. But he doesn't do that much. And then he's just like, bro, I can't afford to take a lower entry level contract. Which it's like, bro,
like he's just coming across as desperate.
Yeah, and then of course we get the GM line that I know will come up many times. Enjoy today, kid. You only get drafted once.
Which is also not always true, but I'm willing to give him a little bit more of a pass on that one. It just sounds like a cliche.
Yeah, it's just but that to me honestly felt more authentic than anything. Where if you're a GM who's just like, I don't want to talk to this kid, I'll tell him this.
Yeah, I
You
kind of
know,
respect it, honestly, that Sonny's like,
yeah,
this is not doing anything for me.
yeah, and it's yeah. I won't lie. Of any of the characters in this movie, the trajectory and how things happen with Vontae Mack confused me maybe more than anyone else in this movie because there's so many decisions of how you're supposed to feel about this guy, but then he turns around and acts something completely different that's not true to something on him. And that like this is the first point of it, this kind of desperate, kind
Yeah,
of thing. But then we'll see it in other parts. But I'm like, his character to me more than anything, I'm just like, what do I want like with this guy?
yeah. All of the characters, all of the football players that we really encounter, this includes like the current NFL players in it too. They just all come across as like at best complicated and at worst just like monsters. But we do get to meet in earnest a new player when Sonny stops off at a gas station. Terry Crews, Ray J's dad, who apparently was a great Browns player, calls on his son's behalf. He eventually hands the phone off to Ray, as played by Arian Foster. Sonny asks Ray if he hurt his hands in the fight, which on one hand is like a reasonable like injury concern. On the other hand, it's very clear that you can say like with Bo Callahan, the Browns weren't really scouting him. They didn't really think it was realistic to scout him because he was the presumed number one pick. But Ray Jennings, they're clearly at least targeting. They're at least considering. How are you waiting until the day of the draft, and how are you not like looking at his hands like at the combine or at some sort of individual workout? Like
Well,
unless
and
this
that's the
fight
thing.
just
Are we
happened.
are we gonna say are we? That's the one thing we don't know is when did this happen?
I kind of got the impression that it happened like a while ago, like that it happened like
It seemed to me
during
like it
their
was
season or something.
yeah, or after the season before the draft.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but unless it happened like the day before, you should have had some sort of ability to find this information out. And if he's wondering about this, so is everybody else.
and you know,
So's ESPN.
gonna say, and if you're just asking the kid, he's not gonna tell you. Actually, man, my hand's pretty busted up. If it was like, you're not gonna get an honest answer out of him
He kind of doesn't
if he's
answer
a
the question at
competitor.
all. He kind
No,
of
he
is just
just looks at
he's
his
like
hands.
justifying he's like justifying the fight. He's just saying that like, well, actually these guys were like, messing around. They had it coming. You don't say that. Like even if it's true, why would what
He's like,
benefit is that
I'm not in a
serving?
gang. I'm not in a gang, Sonny. Now the guys I was with, I grew up with them. They're in a gang, but
Yeah.
it's like, oh,
I mean,
I
I guess
mean,
I respect the honesty, but like,
but we've seen other professional athletes who continue to hang around people like that. Like I think that's something, especially maybe now, maybe more than 14, but teams are looking at a lot more and coaching up young players. Like, hey, you got money now. Like I get they're your friends, but now I mean, Ja probably being the first athlete I think of in things like
sure.
this where things have happened. But it's just like, and maybe the fact that I would assume that Terry Crews played for Sonny's dad. So I'd assume that him and Sonny have a relationship.
Yeah.
Like that was like of all the calls, maybe even that's the one to me that felt like, hey, I'm reaching out to my buddy to try to help my kid. Like
Yeah.
that's like that call,
I
I'm like, okay, I get it.
I
But
understand I understand Terry Cruz's motivation. I don't understand anything that Sonny or Ray is doing in this. It's just weird.
yeah.
So Also, Sonny sees a truck at the gas station that has "Fire Sonny" written on like the dirt in the back of the window, which seems to have some sort of impact on him. But
Which,
it
hey,
also
you know, that's what people are writing in graffiti on the dirt on trucks now is fire at GM.
so people see, like fans seem to really hate him, and I think it's partially because he fired his dad, which we'll get back to. But like, I think they said he'd only been there for 2 years. I feel like
Yeah,
fans get mad at GMs all the time. Like, I wouldn't
sure.
like if around St. Louis I saw somebody with like a "Fire John Mazale" at the back of their car sign, it wouldn't be like astonishing to me. But also, he's been the GM for 17 years. Like, sort of the
Yeah,
negative feelings have built up, and like thinking back to like it just like it seems very singularly focused on this particular guy. And granted, the coach of the Browns is new, so I guess in that sense it makes sense that people aren't clamoring to fire the new guy. But there is a very focused anger
yeah.
towards Sonny.
But at that point, in my experience, like at that point, like, all right, let's see what the GM and the coach can cook up. He's a brand new coach. Let's see. Like, if like the St. Louis Blues this season, like I won't lie, like if things don't work out after next year, I might be like, maybe take a look at Army, but I'm not like clamoring that Doug Armstrong needs to be fired right now. And there's
Yeah,
probably a little bit of talk around it, but
but and also though, and maybe this is an NFL versus NHL kind of thing, but it's not like there would be in like an NHL draft preview of the Blues, people are just constantly talking about how mad they are at the GM. They're gonna be like looking at the prospects. They're gonna be like, "Hey, this Vontae Mack. He went to Ohio State, right down the road. That'd be exciting." Oh, Ray Jennings. His dad was a great player for us. Maybe we can get him too. Maybe.
yeah,
And I guess Bill Callahan's probably not on their radar because he wasn't on the Browns' radar until like an hour ago. But the fact that they aren't like discussing these players is just totally incongruous to the way that like
yeah.
media and fans actually treat things. We have another introduction to make, though, which is the
Uh,
owner of the Cleveland Browns, Frank
this,
Langella. You will notice that he is wearing sunglasses. You will notice that he is always wearing sunglasses, which is
that's how you know he's a
uh,
bad guy.
honestly, it's a great creative decision. I'm actually a big fan of the glasses. He is so Frank Langella decides that he wants to meet with Kevin Costner, not at the team facilities during what is surely one of the biggest days of the year for
At
the
the greatest
Browns,
place
but
ever.
at a water park. Is completely empty besides the two of them. I can't really tell if it's just not open for the season yet, or regardless of, there's nobody else
Yeah,
there. Frank Langella explains the dungeon drop, which is a water slide. He mentions how people will stand in a long line for a huge splash. Very delicate symbolism about how people love a huge splash.
people pay to get wet.
Giggity. So the so besides the fact of how stupid this metaphor is, and besides the fact that he dragged the guy away from his job to talk about it, when like I think he probably could have explained a water slide to Kevin Costner. I don't think that was going to be like a huge issue. Why did he wait until the day of the draft to bring this up? If he's like, "Hey, we need to like really generate interest in this team because apparently the Cleveland Browns are hurting for fans in this world, but if we need to generate this interest, do it like months ago." Again, like this movie works under the premise that the NFL season ended like yesterday and that they're just like getting ready to do they're going to just like squeeze their entire off season into this one day.
Yeah. And maybe that would have been a better choice for the movie. Like you started in like, mid February and follow it through to draft day or something. Like
I agree.
honestly, that would be like a cool, like that'd be a long movie to do, but like the way that like streaming services and stuff are now, like, dude, do a TV show like that. Like, I'd watch the heck out of that. But
I could see them doing like a Hard Knocks type of thing, but with the draft.
yeah, and but yeah, I mean, the whole thing with Frank Langella, like some of the things he says, and like I'm like 90% sure he's being glib. He's like, Kevin Costner, like, well, what do you want? In terms of players, like, I hear quarterbacks are good.
Yeah,
It's like,
he's either being sarcastic or he's just like doesn't know anything about football and is just like a rich guy. I can really buy it either way.
but then he goes into talking about, he seems like he knows a heck of a lot about Ray Stevenson or Ray Stevens, Ray Jennings. Sorry, I'm thinking of the late great Ray Stevenson, the actor who recently passed. But he goes into talking about him, and then he talks about the coach, wanting a big, this seems to be a big bruising running back centered coach that we'll meet.
Yeah. Which is not like super detailed, I guess, but if you're not sure that a quarterback is a good thing to have, it does seem like a bit of a detail.
Yeah.
So they do briefly discuss Brian Drew in this scene. The Browns were apparently 5-1 the year before, and then Brian Drew got hurt and they finished 6-10. Why they've decided that the quarterback needs to be replaced when the team went 1-9 without the quarterback, they clearly have other problems. Like, Brian Drew might not be perfect, but he's clearly not the problem. It's completely inscrutable. And, like, they're just completely furious about Brian Drew for getting hurt. I don't get it. It's so confusing.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And, yeah, I mean, this franchise, as we'll continue to see in the rest of the movie, the communication inside of this organization is like therapists who watch this movie would be like, oh man, I'm sitting on a gold mine if I get in here. Like, it's awful.
It's confounding how much these people do not work together.
It makes me and my ex-wife look like the greatest tag team of people in the history of the world.
Like, I think that like Kevin Costner has less relationship with other members of the Cleveland Browns organization than I have with like complete strangers, and then it includes the member of the organization that he has impregnated. There's just nothing going on. While they're discussing players though at the water park, Costner mentions he's a fan of Vontae Mack. Frank Langella warns him that that defense does make a splash. So that's not the worst point in the world if indeed that's your concern, is just making a splash. But again, you've had months to discuss this. You've had months to decide this. He could have said, hey, we're not drafting a linebacker no matter how good they are. We need like a skill position player. Could have said that in February and saved all of this time. We know at the very minimum that Kevin Costner spent enough time with Vontae Mack that he gave him his phone number, which is not a lot, but it shows that he at least put some effort into it.
Yeah.
All of this could have been saved.
Yeah.
All right. So the next thing that comes up, Sonny gets back in the car. We're back to the sports talk show. A quote from the sports talk host: "You're almost glad Coach Weaver isn't around to watch his son run this team into the ground." Which seems harsh, but whatever. Coach Weaver, again, he died a week ago. Like, what did Sonny Jr. do in the last week that, like, really changed things? Like, he was around for this.
And like you continue to say, he's been there 2 years, and last season, seemingly the reason they went down the toilet is because their starting quarterback got hurt. It
And the
makes no sense.
and they're like criticizing how bad they were last year and how you know who bears a lot of responsibility for the team falling apart when the quarterback gets hurt? The coach. The coach is Sonny Weaver Sr. Oh God.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
It's like I get that they're trying to build, and this is the point where being the casual, like I get they're trying to build the narrative, but to anybody who knows anything who's been a sports fan of any team, it just doesn't make sense. That, like, no offense, casual sports fans are like NFL teams. Like, how many of them honestly know the name of their GM?
Not most. Like, yeah, it's maybe with Sonny it's a little bit different because he's related to such a major figure,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
still though. And the thing is, if Sonny Jr. were just like completely and like destroyed by the death of his father, which I don't think he is. Like I think he not that he's apathetic to it or anything, but he doesn't seem like he's like completely like unable to like emote or deal with anything. If that were the case though, there's a bunch of other people in the front office who would be like, yeah, we're gonna make the decisions now. Like we're gonna sort of fill in for you at this time.
right.
Just like take a couple days. We have enough people. But again, they don't communicate, so it's not like they
Yeah,
have the ability to we cut back to Seattle. I
pancake
believe
man.
yeah, I believe it was Tom that said, I really thought I could get Sonny Weaver to bite. He just lost his old man. So they're just like straight up predators at this point.
Yeah, I mean, not just being like, like. Here's the thing. What makes them perfect is like I get somebody maybe going after somebody, and to be fair, they will learn some of the things they try to do to other GMs later in this movie for dumber reasons. To be fair, is ridiculous. But the fact that they're like, it's okay if that's what you're thinking in the back of your head. Just don't say it out loud. Like
Yeah, I mean, great
now
they
you're
don't
just
say
a
it
little mustache twirling
strongly,
villain.
but yeah.
Like,
Yeah. So
yeah,
Sonny calls Tom back again from his car. Again, he has not been to the Cleveland Browns facilities. He has not spoken to a single other person associated with the Cleveland Browns, with the exception of the owner, who doesn't seem to like know that a quarterback is important. He hasn't talked to any assistant GMs. He hasn't talked to Jennifer Garner. Like nothing. He calls though, and he says that he's ready to make the trade. Tom from Seattle changes his mind and says that the demand has now increased to 3 first round picks,
yeah.
which is
Which
still
before Tom answered the call, the owner says to him, "Fleecing."
yeah.
Which I'm just like, come on, like, what are we doing here?
It is interesting they felt the need to throw that in like right before like he picked up the call rather than like before they ever even thought of calling, but whatever.
Yeah,
So they cut away from this before it's established whether he accepts the offer or not, or
yeah,
whether he reasonably is like, hey, I should probably talk to somebody else in the organization about this before I do it. Because like the 3 first round picks, like it is a lot. It's not completely absurd if you're completely sold on the guy you're drafting at number 1 overall. But again, they have done no research on him, which they do
yeah,
sort of best to. So we get to the Browns' war room. The coach, who is played by Dennis Leary, who is very much on one in this movie. I wouldn't say that he's playing this character with a lot of subtlety, but I kind of enjoy it. He's going for
yeah.
it.
He made a choice. Whether which I'm not going to lie, to me, this almost just kind of felt like, hey, I'm Dennis Leary and I'm a football coach now. Like it didn't seem like it was a stretch for him to act this way or anything.
He was kind of playing a like permeation of like the Dennis Leary character.
Yeah, which
Okay.
I think to an extent works in the movie. Like you need somebody. He's almost kind of like I don't. And this is going to be a really nerdy reference that I doubt that you know, but in the Transformers movie Bumblebee, the Decepticons are all coming down. And then John Cena's character is actually when he goes, guys, are we really supposed to trust them? They're called Decepticons. So like Dennis Leary is almost kind of like the guy who's like, okay, which he does outrageous stuff, but like he's almost kind of like the conscience of just like, what are we doing here? Like he's the straight shooter. And they need that in this to an extent, but then they deviate from it at points, and that's where the tone goes all over the place, and there's no character.
Yeah, he's definitely making more reasonable decisions than Sonny, but I would hardly call him completely on top of things either, because he is completely in love with Ray Jennings.
Ray Jennings.
He's talking about how much he would fit in his system, which I'm not sure what system is being run in 2014 that is dependent on a running back that, like, by his own account, is much of a blocker.
I mean, I can tell you what system that is.
Jeff Fisher system?
It is the Jeff Fisher system. That is 100% what it is.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad point. They're kind of Jeff Fisher parallels. They both had success at another spot where you could easily say that success was not because of them, but in spite of them.
You know, I could be a decent coach with Prime McNair and George probably, but
yeah. My other note is that Dennis Leary says like some mildly racist comments about Samoans in that, but like that's honestly kind of one of the more realistic parts of the movie. I'm gonna just kind of look past it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not under the illusion that, you know, and there's other conversations you'll see that people have in the movie that are probably realer than we want to admit they are, in terms of just like, locker room talk with players and people in the business. I'm sure that, if you're using the real language and everything's flying, this is a hard R movie just from language alone, probably.
Yes. This is a movie that apparently initially was rated R, which is very confusing. They do say the F word one time. It is not in a sexualized context, so that's very much allowed in PG-13 movies.
Yep.
I don't
get
know.
One.
Yeah. And we'll get to that, and we usually stray away from too bad of language on this pod, but it's gonna be a little hard not to say that line at least once we get to it.
You have to, yeah.
Yeah, it would be a disservice to discuss this movie because it's frankly the best line of the movie.
It might be, yeah.
Yeah. So Sonny walks in. He starts erasing a dry erase board, and he announces that apparently he accepted Seattle's offer. And he says, we got the number one pick, and the war room starts celebrating, which, I mean, I guess makes sense, because there is no, like, bit of confusion of, like, why?
Yeah.
Like, we didn't talk about this.
Why did nobody know?
Like, forget that not even that he didn't consult anybody. Like, he never, like, hinted that this was a possibility. I don't think he thought this was a possibility prior to him getting the call from Tom.
Yeah. It's so out of the blue to the point where it's like, and of course the stars aligning kind of a thing where, Frank Langella just happened to tell him to make a splash. Yeah. And he had already gotten the call this morning. Now maybe the owner guy called, Frank Langella, like the G. McBride called Frank Langella. Maybe that happened and we don't know about it, and that's what prompted the conversation.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, I mean, the war room's like, all right, we're getting Bo Callahan, except.
Yeah. So what happens is after he says they got the number one pick, and after someone yells, they just got Bo Callahan, Costner proceeds to ask Jennifer Garner's character if this is going to screw them up with the salary cap. Which is another reminder, he has not discussed this with anybody, and he's just like assuming it's going to work. She explains that it should increase their cap hit around $1.5 million and they can make it work. That's honestly the least of their problems when it comes to this trade. But it is, like, again, weird that nobody else came into the conversation. Like, Dennis Leary complains about the fact that he was, like, left out of the loop, and he does seem kind of, like, a little bit annoying about it, but he very much has a point. Like, because you're going to be coached by him.
Yeah, it's like at that point you're like, all right, I like, and I don't know about you, but I'm like, that whole exchange because Dennis Leary asked Kevin Costner, "Do you think you should have consulted me at all?" And Kevin Costner's just like, "No, this is my decision." I'm like, who the heck
Which is,
would want to coach under this guy? Like,
yeah, which is funny, but it's also like, this guy's stupid. Like, what's he doing?
yeah,
Yeah.
his philosophy. And here's the thing. Okay, if you have that strained of a relationship with the head coach, it's like, and I think he even says, "You coach, I pick the team, you coach the team I give you. That's the roles." Even if that's your philosophy, you have assistant GMs, you have a team of people. Like, you're not gonna go rogue like this on your own and just do it.
Yeah. And if you're going to make a trade without consulting anybody, it's going to be a much smaller trade, or it's going to
Yeah,
have to be like a no-brainer. It would have to be like, hey, we'll give you a number one pick for your number one pick. Well, yeah, sure, why not? I'll move up. But
yeah,
that's not what happened. Dennis Leary, though, is clearly like the one person who's not psyched about the trade, presumably because he wants a running back and he realizes that trading up to number one is not going to be to secure the running back. He
well,
says,
it's,
tell me, what do we give up? So Costner says, Costner just says our number one pick this year, and he doesn't add anything else.
yes, Dennis Leary,
Like
and
I guess he thought that there was going to be no follow up questions.
yeah,
Yeah, so yeah, Leary says and then Costner says our first round pick next year, and then the guy from Veep, I don't remember his character's name or the actor's
yeah,
name, but I wrote
yeah.
down his filmography. Apparently, in 2014, he was in Draft Day, Inherent Vice, and The Interview. That is a incredible 3-pack movies for the same year.
Wow, well done, sir.
Yeah, he says he just immediately is justifying the trade. He's like, "Well, that's a lot, but you get a player like Callahan,"
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
Sonny adds, "And the year after that."
And now they all hate the trade
Again
instantly.
and again, if you're getting a guy that you think is going to be your franchise quarterback, it's a trade worth doing. And if it's a guy that you think is like truly special, those future first round picks are not going to be particularly high first round picks because you've just gotten,
Right.
yeah. But they have not scouted Bo Callahan even a little bit. And Sonny does concede that this was a mistake and that this is on him. Yeah, it is. Um, I guess it makes sense that he wouldn't have scouted Bo Callahan that much if he was picking number 7 and assumed that he was going to go number 1. But regardless, it's like,
Yeah, it's usually though, like I feel like the top guys get scouted by every teams typically just in case there's an opportunity that comes to trade up
yeah.
in general. But
Like, it makes total sense for any team to scout Bo Callahan because you can decide, hey, he's not going to fall to us, but we can trade up. But he decided to kind of do that process in reverse.
yeah. So like at this point it's like, all right guys, we got 9 hours to see if he's our guy.
Yeah. So Costner and the rest of the war room are interrupted by a call from Frank Langella. Langella says he's headed to New York. Sonny asks, "You're going to the draft?" And Langella sarcastically says, "No, I'm going to see Spider-Man turn off the dark," which I thought was an incredibly funny reference. The musical actually had closed before the 2014 draft, but it's such a weird, like, time capsule joke that I'm actually going to forgive it.
Yeah. Oh, it's and two, just the way that if people aren't familiar, the way Frank Langella delivers any dialogue, like it's very theatrical. The dude chews every word that he says. And to be fair, that's probably most of his acting. He's a very good actor, by the way. I don't want to be
Yeah.
like I'm smashing on Frank Langella here. I love him in Frost Nixon, but which he actually did the play before the movie, which was also kind of a cool thing. But
Yeah. This is
you
also
know,
the second movie in which Frank Langella has played a sports owner, and in which the team involves an inappropriate relationship because he's the owner of the team in Eddie, and he's dating Whoopi Goldberg's character, who's the coach.
oh my gosh, I haven't thought about the movie Eddie in forever. When she coaches the Knicks,
Yep.
oh my gosh. Which I mean, to be fair, like in real life, how great would a Frank Langella Whoopi Goldberg couple be? That would be.
Boy, do I have some news for you. They dated for like 5 years. I
See,
believe. I think she might have gone directly from Ted Danson to Frank Langella, which is something else.
I mean, all I have to say is I wish I cared about stuff when that was all happening because they would have been my favorite celebrity couple.
Yeah, that's like the Felicity Huffman, William H. Macy of their moment.
Of their moment, yeah. But anyway, back to the movie as we're like almost 2 hours into this podcast and not even halfway through this movie.
Yeah, not close.
Uh,
So Frank Langella apparently printed up a Bo Callahan #1 Browns jersey. Again, they have never specifically had a conversation in which they agreed that Bo Callahan would be drafted.
I also didn't know that teams had to print up their own first round draft pick jerseys.
They don't. They print those at the draft, but I guess Frank Langella was very excited about it. And also, to be fair, he doesn't know anything about how football runs anyway. So we head back to the general office rather than the war room. This is where we get our introduction to the intern Rick, who I know is your favorite character.
My favorite character. I'm a big fan of actually the guy who plays him too. Actor named Griffin Newman. Shout out to him. He's got a great movie podcast called the Blank Check Podcast. It's got like over 400 episodes where they just do deep dives into movies and stuff. Check it out. But Rick, he's the best part of this movie.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun, and for some reason, everyone just bullies him like the entire movie. Like, he does eventually.
Yeah, but the best part though is that Jennifer Garner always stands up for Rick.
It's true.
Like it's the best part of her character because she's always like, "Don't talk to the intern like that."
Yeah,
like,
well, because
she's at least trying to be like, "Don't get us into a lawsuit."
Well, like the one guy from the war room is like yelling at him because he doesn't immediately have tape of Bo Callahan, which
why doesn't he have access to the tape of Bo Callahan?
Yeah. And he's like, don't ever talk to an intern like that again. It's like, correct, don't. It's very obvious.
And what kind of soda do you want?
Yeah. Oh, Rick.
It's so good. He's clearly a guy. And to be fair, like he's a brand new intern filling in for somebody who has mono.
Yeah.
On the day of the draft.
It is weird that they positioned his desk to be up there, but whatever. In the realm of unrealistic things in this movie, I'm not gonna get too that one. Because
we a little brevity to the movie.
We are about to get to who, in my opinion, is the worst actor in this movie. Because Sonny gets feels a call from Super Agent Chris Crawford, as he's known, who is portrayed by P. Diddy. Which boy has that aged interestingly.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to dig too deep into the problematic nature of P. Diddy in the year 2024. I am going to say he is awful in this movie. He is so bad. I don't get it. Like, his part's not huge, but they could have gotten like an actual actor for this, and he just is like has this very like stiff kind of like he almost seems like he's supposed to be like, the equivalent of like, Drew Rosenhaus or somebody like that,
Yeah,
or
Scott
looking at other
Boras.
sports like Scott Boras, yeah. Like those have charisma, and this guy just doesn't. Played by freaking P. Diddy. You would think they'd be able to get some sort of charisma, but
I was
no,
gonna say
not really.
the guy's more interesting on a day to day basis in terms of having swag, charisma, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's and yet, like honestly, for me, Diddy shines next to the guy who's in the room with him. Like,
So I think that's fair. So Chris Crawford is with Bo Callahan, who is his client. I think that I feel like that might be intentional of him being Bo Callahan being so stiff. I think that's just like part of what his character is. I'm not confident enough to say that for sure, but yeah, it's uncomfortable hearing him talk, whether that's intentional or not.
yeah, I mean, he's just kind of made out. Like, here's the thing: if he's this can't miss, guy since Andrew Luck, they're making him out at least intellectually to be the anti Andrew Luck. Like Andrew Luck is a very charismatic, very smart human being. Like, I mean, if you ever heard the tapes like him getting sacked and stuff, it's hilarious because he's like congratulating the guys like I'm knocking the crap out of him and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
whereas this guy, I don't know if you told him to turn right, he would know. Like, he's literally asking Diddy while he's on the phone, like, which shirt should I wear? Trying to ask him which one to put on. And which, to be
He gets
fair, those are maybe questions I would even have to ask because I don't have fashion sense. But he's like getting coached on the phone too. Like Diddy's coaching him on what to say.
Yeah, he is supposedly on the honor roll at Wisconsin. That comes up at one point.
Yeah.
Maybe that speaks to the value of Wisconsin education. I'm not really sure, but
Taking that Matt Weiner ballroom dance class or whatever. So
maybe. So Sonny starts talking to Bo. Chris hands the phone off, and Sonny asks, "How important is winning to you?" Uh, Bo's answer is admittedly very trite. But what was he supposed to say? Like, what was
yeah,
the answer?
but yeah, and to be clear, he says winning is everything is his
Yeah,
answer.
which is
And Kevin
boring and
Costner's
it's
like
stiff, but that's the
a lot.
answer.
Yeah, and then he's like, a lot of guys say that. Well, what do you want me to say? Like,
And I think his
winning's
response.
about 80%. Having fun is the other 20, coach or
I
GM.
think that his response is like to that's what he says. Like, I guess a lot of us do say that. It's like, yeah, that's right. Like, I have a lot of problems with Bo Callahan, and will emerge throughout the movie. But like, he answered the question right. Also, at one point, P Diddy holds up a handwritten sign that said, like his dad, basically like telling Bo to like, offer condolences for the loss of his dad. I don't know if this is necessarily a thing that anybody is that concerned about him doing, because also Vontae Mack and Ray Jennings also don't mention his dad.
Yeah. And he seems to have better, but maybe it goes to show that he doesn't have the relationship. Because the funny thing is that's like the last thing he says, and he says to Bo, he's like, "Thank Chris for me." It's almost like he knows Chris told him to say it. A little bit is how I took
Yeah,
that line.
yeah, I think so.
So it's like, but and I know what they're trying to set up, but man, they just are like, we're gonna let you know right off the bat that there's no way they're taking this kid.
Yeah,
At
they're like a big part. The thing is, like, Sonny is like going out of his way the entire time to talk himself out of taking Bo Callahan, which is a good thing to do, I guess, if you're staying at number 7. But it doesn't explain why you made the trade up in the first place. And the next person we hear from, though, Sonny receives a call from his mom. Ellen Burstyn's performance in this movie is what I would call fine. I don't think she has a lot to do. It's not her fault. What was the point of hiring literally Academy Award winning actress Ellen Burstyn to play this character? Like, why? There's not a better actor for it because every other actor is going to play it pretty much the same way.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like when I was looking at kind of the role, it's like I'm always happy to see Ellen Burstyn. I love Ellen Burstyn, but like
Sure.
it was funny. Like I had the thought to myself, I was like, who would be like a comparable person? And then I immediately thought, like, this would have been right kind of in the era when she got big for a little bit. Like June Squibb would have been a perfect actress to put in this role.
Hmm.
In terms of like she'll be sassy and tell you how it is, be that motherly figure to, in the same age range kind of a thing. But like it's generic mom being mom. Now, to be fair, this first conversation may be funnier than the rest of it. This is probably my favorite part of her is this
Oh yeah,
first conversation
sure.
where she starts giving him draft advice like on the phone. Like you sold the you sold the cow
Magic
for some
beans.
magic beans, and it's like, I mean, like that's like something like my mom wouldn't say that to me, but like my dad 100% would have called me and be like, "Well, you screwed up, you know that, right?" Like,
Yeah, and she's not only the mother of a football GM, she's the longtime wife of a football coach. So
yeah,
it stands to reason that she have her opinion on football.
sure.
The reason though that she knows about the trade is because Vontae Mack tweeted about it. I paused this multiple times to make sure I got the wording exactly correct. The tweet says, "Agent just called. Browns trade for number one. Sorry, Cleve. You get Bo. No Vontae. Dumb move." So I will point out first that the little exchange that follows, where Kevin Costner asks, "You're on Twitter," and then Ellen Burstyn says, "You're not." That would be funny. But
I mean, here's the thing: you would think they would have people monitoring these kids' Twitter accounts, even if it's Rick. Like, this is something that in 2014 people would have been monitoring the heck out of social media of these kids.
yes, this is this is an insane idea by Vontae Mack. And
And
like
that's what I'm
Grant,
saying. This is the out of character stuff. We're meant to believe he's this really good kid, great football player. But then he goes out and it's like you're yelling at a team for moving up from 7. Why not try to go after the other 6 teams that have picks? Why not be like, hey, Seattle, you want to take me at 7? Like,
and also why like Cleveland could still take him like by trading back up into the first round. There's nothing. There's a lot of time left. Why would you explicitly criticize anybody? And granted, like Kevin Costner does pretty clearly spell this out. Like, yeah, every other GM, like you have a right to say what you want, but everyone's seeing this and they're thinking you're a problem, which is accurate.
yeah. Now that was a part where it's like he's being, and this is probably a more accurate thing that I don't know that GMs themselves are directly dealing with, but like their guys on staff and agents are coached up in this, like, you have to behave this way because you can't be seen as a guy who overhears something in the locker room and puts it out for the world to see. It's kind of ironic that he does something like this, and yet still Kevin Costner's concern seems to be on what's wrong with Bo Callahan.
Yeah, and we're not too far from it. But the things that are concerning about Bo Callahan, he seems to also be totally mixed up on. There are some real concerns about him, but yeah.
Yeah, it's
So I can't remember if this interrupts the call or if this is immediately after the call. Dennis Leary walks into Kevin Costner's office, and he literally sets the draft analysis on fire.
this is the most ridiculous part of this movie to me.
There is no such thing as metaphor in this movie. Everything is just. He literally sets it up. Literally sets it on fire and places it on his boss's desk.
Where there's a bunch of other paper and things that can catch on fire.
The desk could catch on fire. What? Like,
And yet it stays contained. Well, okay, the other great part is, as this has happened, instead of just going and fighting somebody, Rick just starts yelling for Allie, saying there's a fire. And
yeah.
she comes in with this, like, almost like a toy fire extinguisher to put it out. It's like,
This is
ugh. And then
like,
Allie, though, has a great line after it, too, where she's,
is it
they're like,
a
you guys want any
coffee?
coffee?
Yeah.
And then they tell her, she's like, I'm not getting anything for you, too. It's like, you're acting like
Yeah.
children. I'm not going to get you anything. Like,
Yeah.
it's like,
Which again, it becomes very unclear. So, like, she's the cap expert, but other than mentioning how much of a difference there is between the number 1 and the number 7 pick in terms of their expected salary, she doesn't really do anything else related to the cap. She doesn't seem to do a lot of like office management type stuff, which, is fine, but it seems a little bit weird that that's her role.
yeah, it's like they wanted to give her something that sounds football-y, but then, like, apparently no one else besides Rick or Allie works, like, around the office of the GM, despite there being people and desks everywhere.
Yeah. So in this scene, Dennis Leary is literally wearing his Super Bowl ring around, which I don't believe most people do, but he is. Yeah, Jason is currently flashing his ring. It's okay. It took me a while to calibrate mine to my camera, but um, again, there is no like everything is very spelled out. He references that Kevin Costner is upset because old man died and he's tapping one of his execs, which is not tactful, but it is a little bit weird that this isn't like the only thing being discussed about Sonny right now.
Yeah,
Like,
that's the
it's a
thing,
dumb
it's like, oh, it's a
way.
secret relationship that everybody knows about. Like, how is Frank Langella, like, not been made aware this is all happening? Like,
Yeah, it doesn't seem like either Kevin Costner or Jennifer Garner particularly like Coach Penn, but but he apparently knows about it. So presumably others know about it. Presumably this is going to get
I
spread
mean,
around.
presumably he's only been there a couple of months at this point.
Yeah,
And then he
correct.
goes into this big long thing about, like, why he came to Cleveland. And did you find it awkward too about it? I had to take my very pretty wife out of Dallas and all these rich people to bring her to Cleveland. Like, I'm just like, it just seems like, like, and maybe it's to try to build him up as this guy that's always swung above his weight class. I don't know. Like,
I think he's trying to present himself as doing this for like the greater good, which is like completely ridiculous, but
yeah.
yeah. So Sonny proceeds to call Vontae. Apparently Vontae's ringtone is the NFL on Fox theme song.
I thought that was great personally. I'm like, dude.
Yeah, I guess, man. Like,
I mean, I don't know. As a guy who used to have Mike Gundy screaming, I'm a man, I'm 40 as my text message alert in college, as you're well aware. And
mhm.
that one speaker that we were at when it went off in the middle of them talking was aware. But I I'm like, okay, that was just a fun little fanfare service, I think, which I enjoyed. But
Yeah. Do you enjoy Sonny being the old man that he is, telling Vontae don't Twitter?
don't Twitter. That's literally a bullet point I just have in my notes. It just says, "quote Don't Twitter."
Yeah, and so this actually starts earlier in the movie, but this is where I really started to notice it, and I just couldn't break from it. The split screen bleeding onto the other panel just drove me crazy. So
I think there's a
like
really cool way to do it. They didn't do it.
yeah, like basically you'll have a point where like Vontae Mack is talking, and then like his side of the screen gets bigger, and like he eventually like leaves his screen and is basically walking on top of Kevin Costner, even though they're not in the same state.
Yeah,
It's just yeah.
it's almost like they're like, "Hey, like we got this new feature on our editing suite. Look at this." And then
Yeah.
they proceed to use it because they had used it earlier in the film with, like, even like when Sonny, I think, was walking up to his office or something, it like shows him kind of like walking across where coaches and stuff, and or might have been when he was walking in the first time, but it's like they were clearly trying to make this stylized to be a Sorkin-esque, or even to an extent like what I would call like some of the stuff like Adam McKay has started to has done subsequent, like Big Short and stuff like that, where it's very stylized in almost kind of the professional setting way. It just doesn't work.
and like whenever Adam McKay does it, my thought is always, I'm enjoying this, but I can definitely see the argument against it. This is just totally mangled, though. This movie did not get made for any Academy Award. I feel like I should note that right now.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, to like the Adam McKay thing, like I think it works better in some than others. Like I think it works really well in Big Short how he does it. I didn't think it worked well in Vice when he kind of went to some of the same beats. Like not exactly the same, but and then you see people have copied it. I know I haven't seen the film, but the was it Dumb Money, the GameStop movie? I know.
Yeah, that's very
Big Short.
I have seen it. It's very much in the Adam McKay kind of style.
Yeah, here it's good though. Okay. But yeah.
So next conversation we have is with the Brown strength coach, who only appears in one scene, but is like very aggro, kind of entertaining in that way. The coach declares that Brian Drew is in the best shape of his life and that he's throwing the ball 15 yards deeper. This is a thing that Sonny learns today. This is a thing that Sonny learns the day of the draft. Again, this movie makes a lot more sense if you just assume that Sonny has been in a coma for the last several months.
Yeah. So, all right. So I have to ask you, I have a note here. When the gym stats of him being able to squat 400 pounds, what was it, bench 220 25 times or whatever it was, and throw the ball, the receiver has been doing secret workouts with him, which I think was funny, which we find out later that there's videotapes of these secret workouts. He thinks he can throw the ball 15 yards further. When you hear that from a guy who apparently has had 8 years in the NFL or whatever it is, what is your first thought of what's occurring?
My first thought is it makes sense to draft a quarterback because this guy's gonna be serving a PED suspension.
What I wrote was, I literally wrote, my words were, the gym stats of Brian Drew scream steroids, not he's back. Like, I mean, to be fair, he is Superman.
I was gonna say, he literally is played by the guy that plays Superman in Smallville. So
yeah,
he's got
Tom Welling. Which, to be fair, like, slightly unrecognizable because he definitely like bulked up a little bit for this role. He's not as pretty. Like he looks like a like for whatever reason, I don't know if this is right. Like he reminded me of like a Brian Hoyer a little bit in this movie, just like in terms of like a current NFL quarterback. But yeah, when the strength coach is going on, like if I'm the GM and the guy's telling me this, I'm just like, what'd you give him?
Yeah. Fair. I have a lot of notes on this scene. The Bo Callahan website.
Man. Yes.
So I have a question before we dive into the detail of the Bo Callahan website. Are we to believe that he runs the website, or are we to believe that somebody else runs it as like a fan site for him?
I mean, to me, it feels certainly like it's something he is doing based on their discussion.
That is what I'm leaning towards, but we can kind of address it either way. So, this is a blog that is devoted to Bo Callahan's sexual endeavors. Right. The blog is, for some reason, called Bo's Pack of 10. Despite the fact that he plays in the Big Ten, and the name Bo's Big Tens was right there. This guy supposedly is on the honor roll.
Bo's Perfect Tens. Yeah, you got a lot of things you can go with there.
Hey, well, you just go with, like, I don't know. It's a stupid name anyway, but you at least, like, lean into the pun.
The name is the least of the problems with this entire concept.
Fair, okay. So, this website appears appears to have a registration section, so you can register as a member of this website. Um, it appears to have a full-on sex tape embedded in the front page.
It's certainly appeared that way.
There's a blog section, which, I mean, who knows what that's about. So here's the thing. If this website is being run by a fan regarding Bo Callahan, that's not a good look for Bo Callahan. If this website is being run by Bo Callahan, he's like borderline undraftable. Like, this is a problem. This is so much like as much as like Vontae Mac's tweet is stupid and he shouldn't have done it, this is like what could possibly be like the benefit of this? Like, there's a headline at one point, it's like something about Bo Callahan and a Hollywood starlet.
Yeah.
And like, if
who
you're just like
cares?
literally posting a sex tape of yourself on the internet, and like, again, this is the NFL where they're willing to use like very small character questions as a huge issue. This is a big problem. So War Room is all about obsessing over this website. They're speculating over just how laid Bo Callahan gets. Sonny
They
says
literally
there's
debate how many times a day they think he's getting laid. Like,
yeah,
it's
which I think they're
it's frankly uncomfortable to kind of listen to.
Yeah, and it's also like they're saying like, oh, like 3 times a day, and it's like this guy's got like a addiction problem if that's the case. Like, this is no longer cool. Like, he is tilted way over the line.
I mean, this dude's, Wilt in his heyday at that point, kind of a thing, just not quite like, those levels, but.
And so Sonny's like, we're trying to find his weakness, and someone's comments that he has a weakness for banging hot chicks. Which, I mean, I think he's saying it kind of as a joke, but like, it's so weird that in a movie where the NFL clearly has a say in what's going on, that they're just letting this slide. Like, this is the one case where, like, the NFL, like, actual NFL teams would so clearly have more of a moral compass on this. Then the entire NFL doesn't care about this. This is not a thing that anyone's concerned about. Like, even when people express, like, mild concerns about Bo Callahan, it's not, hey, this guy's, like, clearly a huge distraction. Like, that, like, people are called distractions for the smallest things in the world, in, like, when it comes to the draft. Like, somebody's like likes reading books or something. It's like, oh, this guy's not focused enough on football. How is that like this not happening here?
Yeah. Well, and it's I do applaud the fact that like Kevin Costner, when this is all happening, he's like, I'm basically using every single like ounce of energy I have right now to not fire the 3 of you for having this conversation.
Yeah, and he's
but then
right
after
about
it ends, that. He is. But then after it happens, he's like, oh, bookmark that page. It's like, these creeps are going to go back and look at it later. Like,
so Kevin Costner's right to be like, will you like perverts like pay attention and do your job? But at the same time, if he's just trying to poke holes in Bo Callahan, there you go. You have one right there.
You were just handed a hole.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't move further down this potential line of discussion, but
a gaping no. Anyway,
so Costner, in explaining things to the other guys, he talks about how Joe Montana, John Elway, and Peyton Manning had critics. Montana, I think, mostly fair because he was like a 3rd-round pick, and people thought he was like kind of small or whatever. But the other 2 were like generational prospects, and they went 1st overall. This is like some real Steph Curry can't shoot stuff.
John Elway throws too hard.
Yeah. Famous John Elway, the guy who was able to was drafted number 1 overall and was able to work out a trade to go to the destination he wanted to.
You had Tom Brady sitting right there. He was a way later pick. And
Tom Brady will come up later, and I do have some notes about that as well.
Sure.
So Sonny leaves the war room and he calls Tom from Seattle. Seattle fans are like gathering outside of the team complex to protest the trade. I'm not sure why they're that hung up. Maybe the whole Washington thing. Maybe there's
I
like a real
mean,
affection for Callahan beyond like his value. Um, Tom says that he didn't find any knocks on Bo Callahan, which I think is honestly fair. Like, if they just thought he was like merely a good quarterback, then this trade still makes a lot of sense for them.
yeah.
Uh, One protester has an effigy of Tom, which seems again harsh.
I mean, it's crazy because the passage of time at this point, this is like maybe an hour.
I could maybe buy like two, but these people clearly don't have anything else going on in their day.
I mean, to make the effigy, which I mean, a fun little moment. Do you think that looks like me? He says to like his little assistant or whatever, just kind of, yeah. Doesn't really say anything, just kind of nods and walks away. But it's so like to me, I'm like, it doesn't make any sense that people like would show up within hours with like. I mean, to be fair, these are signs that you'd like see at a WWE event, just
Yeah.
handwritten on poster board with some marker, and it's
It's not
just
like
like,
they're writing those like hours in advance or days in advance. They're not just people who are just showing up and just getting, you know, like what was their plan for the day? Did they have nothing else going on? They
I
taken the
mean,
whole day off in order to prepare for the draft.
in anticipation to hear one name called that day
Yeah,
as
and a name
fans.
that presumably all of them were pretty certain of what it was going to be and who it was going to be.
Yeah, it's and this is the other thing where it starts to get ridiculous. It's like this is the first time we see really an unusual reaction. Like, no offense, like even if you had a generational talent like Bo Callahan is, at least in the ESPN's what everybody else is getting, that's what they're getting. This guy's can't miss. Dude got 3 number ones for it. Like as a fan, I'm like, I might be
Yeah, I
okay with
mean,
this.
we were both fans of the St. Louis Rams when they made the trade that was referenced earlier. I was ecstatic when they made that trade because they got
Oh
so many
yeah,
picks.
yeah,
It's like if you're a team that's drafting that high, unless there's some like maybe if the Rams had gotten the number one pick because Andrew Luck was considered a can't miss in the way like
yeah,
RG3 was considered at least a little bit more like there's question marks.
yeah,
But like I was ecstatic because the Rams were really bad and I wanted them to get better.
yeah. Well, and they had just, you know, they still had a young quarterback at that point.
Yeah. Well, like, and Tom also specifically mentioned that he was impressed by like what Seattle's quarterback did the year before, but apparently these fans did not think that he did a very job.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's funny. We could have potentially seen something like this play out if Chicago had faith in Justin Fields, but instead of trading the pick, they traded the quarterback.
That's correct. So after Sonny gets off the phone with Tom, he and Jennifer Garner have a conversation in a closet, which I guess you call it a closet. It's a little big, but like a
And it's like a
side
store.
room,
Say it looks like a almost like a
like a
document
supply
storage
room.
room.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They remain completely without chemistry.
it's so like I can't even say it. Like literally every time I talk, I just say Kevin Costner. I really literally wrote here. Has Kevin Costner ever had feelings for another person? He is still awkward as hell with Allie. Like,
So the thing is, like Kevin Costner, the actor, has had some great chemistry with like Susan Sarandon or with Amy Madigan
sure.
and like Jennifer Garner. Okay, Jennifer Garner has like pretty good, not great, but like pretty good chemistry with freaking Ricky Gervais in The Invention of Lying. And this is Ricky Gervais we're talking about. Like, how do these people have no chemistry? Like, I actually am willing to kind of defend the casting of Jennifer Garner, even though the age gap's not ideal, just because like she was like 41 years old when this movie was made, and if she were a little bit older, the pregnancy thing would be a little bit less believable, I guess.
Yeah.
I think they kind of had to walk the line there, but also they could have just cast
Yeah.
somebody younger than Costner, I
But it,
guess.
yeah, I mean, it's, I mean, and to be fair, like she looks, fantastic. So you're not looking at her being like, oh, I think she's getting a little up there or anything. Like
Yeah, I
you
actually
don't
had
look at her.
actually I looked up their age gap, and it was like I want to say it was like 16 or 17 years age gap between them, and it seems like more. I would have for sure guessed more, just because
I would have thought it was over 20, if I'm being honest.
yeah, like Kevin Costner looks old in this movie in ways that like he looks older in this movie than he does in like Molly's Game or some movie that comes after this. And she just looks like she hasn't aged a day. Like she looks
Yeah.
still extremely young.
Yeah. And, I don't know if that's by design. And to be fair, it's like, I'm not somebody who's like, when you're dealing with adults in this capacity like they are, it's like, hey, whatever. If you have a 20-year age gap, you have a 20-year age gap. Like it's not creepy to me in terms
I
of
did. It's creepy because employer versus employee,
yes,
but yes.
yeah. The age gap itself is not, but the
Yeah, it's within the half your age plus 7 for what it's worth. I did do the math on it.
well,
So the next thing that happens is they're interrupted by Rick, who says that Brian just trashed Sonny's office. Apparently, that's not like a massive flag for everybody. That the quarterback. Also, my next comment is also roid rage question mark. But he is just straight up trashing Sonny's office. Brian is demanding a trade. Sonny is, for once, making a good point, which is talk to your agent about it. And Brian says he's demanding a man-to-man conversation. At this point, even if I'm not sold on Bo Callahan, I'm also like, Brian Drew's a lunatic. Like, why do I want this guy as like
like
my quarterback going forward?
one, yeah. I mean, and they show us the trashed office and stuff. It's like the dude legitimately was like breaking stuff in his office. Like
Yes.
you could have called the police on him for what he did.
Yeah.
And I get it. The other thing here too is like, yes, like go through your agent is one thing, but like you have, I'm assuming like a, even below the GM, probably like a director of player personnel or something like that, that there's still levels to this. Like, I don't think, now the starting quarterback may have more of a line to the GM than maybe other players would,
Probably, yeah.
but like, also, is there no security in this place?
Well,
I
there
mean,
is
we
a
meet
head of
the head of
security
security,
who's
but he
apparently
doesn't,
just like doing scouting.
not even scouting. The dude's like gathering water cooler intel from other guys around the league.
Yeah. The Browns have a lot of problems in this movie.
it's and like I get it. It's for the dramatic piece, and it makes you want to be like, oh, the guy just wants to play, but it's like then let's try not committing crimes.
It's a worthy idea.
Yeah, I mean, the guy wants the ball, but
Yes, and basically, as soon as his conversation with Brian Drew ends, Sonny gets a call from the Chiefs, who are asking about Brian Drew, assuming that they're going to draft a quarterback number 1 overall. Sonny basically doesn't even entertain like any sort of discussion about what Brian Drew could garner, which at this all times seems like this would be a good time to be like, hey, this guy who just like trashed my office? If I like trade him before anyone finds out about this, that sounds not that you have to make it at that moment, but he's not even having a conversation.
yeah, I won't lie. To me, this scene was pointless.
I agree, yeah.
Like and they allude to the GM's like, oh, this is my favorite thing. It's like, he asks him like, how's Brian Drew looking and stuff. He's like, yeah, strong as ever, throwing the ball 15 yards further. And just at a word, he's like, all right, I just wanted to confirm. Like, okay, you're just going to take the guy who you're potentially looking to trade from his word, and then he
I do.
tells him that obviously the agent sent the tapes to him.
Yeah.
Which, like, okay, I get that, but just it. But there's no payoff to it. Like, it's almost it's just
It's
like
an unnecessary scene.
yeah, or even if they place this like 10 minutes later in the movie, but when you place it directly after trade me, talk to your agent. So it's like, okay, he clearly talked to his agent, but and somebody's interested because the agent. I mean, what I'm assuming at that point is the agent just started calling or just sent the tapes out to all the GMs.
Yeah. I'm guessing that probably happened whenever the news broke about the trade for number one, would be my guess. Because that would have been like very quick turnaround for the Chiefs to be calling.
I agree, and it's even still like, I mean, I guess that's just the serendipity that goes. Yeah, excuse me, with telling a story in Hollywood, but
All right, so the next scene we get is Dennis Leary confronting Jennifer Garner in the lunchroom. Really, there isn't a whole lot to this other than Dennis Leary is just like super sexist and does not come off as pleasant. Jennifer Garner is very defensive about how, and I think that there is like they could have made a better point about this, basically being like, "Hey, like I'm a woman in a man's world. I had to work like twice as hard as anybody because people won't take me seriously." And there is sort of a lot of nods to Jennifer Garner being a very serious person, being a very like hardworking and thorough person. Like even if we don't see it acted out, we at least like kind of get that impression. But also this like character who like shows some sort of like female empowerment, somebody willing to like break through this glass ceiling, is also in an illicit love affair with her boss. So
yeah,
perhaps the movie's not quite taking their feminism as seriously as
yeah,
some might
and
like.
sure, and I think too in this scene, like the major point of it is Dennis Leary is he realizes that Kevin Costner doesn't want to talk to him, and he's just he's like, you have his ear, I don't. Can you try to talk him off the ledge from this, basically?
And he does have a point. Like I don't know that Sonny's necessarily going to listen to her, but he's way more likely to listen to her than to him.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, which, to be fair, red flags all over that organization if that's the case, for a
Yes.
multitude of reasons, and none of them have to do with the actual, like, she probably the way they build her, she would know football better than you or I, inside and out. Like,
Yes. There's little evidence to show this, but also it's not her story. So I get why that's
yeah,
not like fleshed
yeah,
out.
yeah,
Maybe this is
yeah. I mean, here too, we get a little bit of the background of how did she get into it. Well, she's a lawyer, like went to
yeah.
law school, which I know law school can put you in a multitude of different places, based on the type of law and stuff. So it's like, okay, she went through law school. So it's like it builds her credibility a little bit more, I guess, in terms of like, and maybe they're trying to build it up as just not that I didn't sleep my way to the top. I got to the top and then I slept.
Yeah. Which I think is fair. I think that she wasn't hired because of being
Well,
like eye candy or whatever, but
well,
still.
and the implication, I guess, that she was with the Browns long before Sonny came
Yeah.
around in the GM position.
Yeah, because there are references to Sonny previously being, I assume, the GM in San Francisco. So
Yeah,
it's not like this is the beginning of his career. So next up, Sonny's talking to the head of security that we referenced before. I'm just going to refer to him as Warren from There's Something About Mary, because every time I see him, I just think of Warren from There's Something About Mary.
Warren.
Which, boy, is that a character that has a questionable character, but
Yeah,
yeah, that's the relationship between the Fairley brothers and the handicapped is extremely complicated. So,
yeah,
but anyway, Warren, as I'm call him, calls Bo Callahan, who I'm going to call in this sentence the sex tape guy, quote, pretty vanilla. How much work did he do?
well, here's the thing. There's something like the guys who aren't trying to find dirt so much. They're doing the general thing. We're able to find this massive, questionable sexcapade website of Bo Callahan. Yet this guy gets access to find police reports from an incident at his birthday party. Like, what?
All right. So apparently, at Bo's 21st birthday party, things got out of control. Some locals heard about it and showed up. Cops took everybody's name. Through that, they were able to determine that even though like Bo wasn't responsible for this, the big takeaway is that none of his teammates showed up to the birth party. Which, how is this a bigger red flag than the website? I can't get past the fact that the website is just like played off as a laugh and not as like, oh, this guy's like bad news.
Well, and here's the thing. The two could definitely be. It's like, oh, the guy cares a whole lot more about doing that kind of stuff than building relationship with his teammates. But to me, like, if the guy's a like, good enough player, like, being, I don't know, like, I know you don't want to lose the locker room and stuff, but like, those guys, if he at least has the common win goal, which is to win football games, which he seemingly did at Wisconsin at least.
Yeah. I get why it's a
Okay,
concern. I don't get why it's such a big concern.
yeah, I'm with you. It's like to me, I'm like, okay, like, but that's also like college. Like that's the thing too. It's like people have to realize, and this is with anything, I think too. Like kids when they get drafted out of college, they're still kids. Like you like, oh, they're young men now, but I remember me when I was coming out of college, and this is pre NIL too. Like so if Bo Callahan was getting paid a lot of money, it was illegally. But you think about it like now though, like I joke that I just want my son to be like a fourth string offensive lineman when he gets older at an SEC school, because then he'll be set leaving school and not have to play football very much. And then
Sort of the Chase Daniel principle.
yeah, because but it's like yeah, the whole was teammates in common. Like I get it that you know maybe more than me and you like trying to be friends with our coworkers. It's a different relationship you want to have with teammates, I guess.
Sure.
But I don't know, like we're and I know all these people show up, but who knows who he invited? If it was a big, massive party and then people showed up, maybe it was an intimate gathering with close personal friends,
Yeah.
and
I mean,
and just his teammates. He may get along with them, but they don't happen to be his closest personal friends. Like,
and maybe and the thing about 21st birthday parties is you kind of don't invite everybody you know. You can kind of only invite people that are also 21 based on like the way it works. Like maybe he's friends with a bunch of maybe he's like old for his grade. I don't know. Like there's a million
yeah,
reasons why, but they will kind of get into an alternate theory of the case where Sonny calls Wisconsin's head coach. You referenced him earlier, played by Sam
yeah,
Elliott. He's great in this one scene. The
yeah.
one scene is questionable, a lot of the mechanics of it, but I enjoyed his performance individually.
Agreed. I think they appear to be practicing on a high school field for starters.
Yeah, they do
But
have a casual establishing shot of Madison, which I'm kind of surprised they did, considering how much like obvious like B-roll footage of like NFL cities they were doing. So Sam Elliott claims that the other Wisconsin players were at the party, but that the police that showed up didn't want to drag their names through the mud because they hadn't done anything wrong. What are your thoughts on this?
My honest first thought is that like that's a really good response to like not have pre-planned if somebody ever asks you this question.
It's a it's a pretty good response off the cuff. At the same time, though, the idea that the cops are gonna like not question them, I find a little bit confusing because, like,
I mean,
again,
it almost
like,
sounds like they were maybe paid off by the university. Like,
yeah, it's kind of a complicated thing. Again, I don't think this is the big deal for them.
well,
Confusing.
the other piece of this is too. We know it was Bo's birthday party, but we don't even know was Bo's name and was he interviewed in a report? Because that would be the easiest way to see if they really could have left everybody out is if Bo wasn't interviewed. They just know he was there because the other people maybe stated, "Oh, we were here for Bo Callahan's 21st birthday."
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that. Maybe that's how we.
You know, but at
But
the
again, they
same
don't follow up
time,
on any of
it's
this.
yeah, it's just like immediately like Kevin Costner hears it and he's like, "All right, got to find something else. This is no good. You gave me crap intel." Like,
Yeah.
it's like, wow, like that's that's certainly something. Also, that is odd that like it was like a like that he was running the practice seemingly while talking on the phone. Where like in college, like I've watched a few college practices in my day, and like they're also individualized within their groups most of the time. Like the head coach is just sitting and watching. He's not really running anything. Like he's going station to station, maybe looking at people individually talking to the players, but he's not like running the practice.
I do think it's very clear that nobody associated with this movie knows anything about football or how any of it works. I could see if you didn't know
You
anything about.
literally had Terry Crews in the movie who played in the NFL, but yet they
So did
just make him
so
a
did
dad.
uh so did the strength coach. He also played in the NFL. There were and there a bunch of like cameos of much more notable NFL players,
Well,
but
yeah, and
they
yet,
just
well,
bypassed
and
it.
yeah, I mean, and you literally worked with the NFL. Just yeah,
All right, so we have another trade offer for the number one overall pick. Buffalo offers two players who, I mean, we have no way of knowing who these players are because they're not real, and two future
yeah,
firsts. Not the first from this year, but two future firsts.
yeah,
Um, I don't know who these players are, obviously, but like this seems like a pretty like crazy thing to do. Like this seems like a terrible trade. Dennis Leary's all about it. Dennis Leary apparently called Buffalo about it
yeah,
and tried to orchestrate this trade. This would have been up there in terms of just silliness. The idea that you would trade the number one overall pick and not get a single pick later in that draft, just I have a hard time wrapping my mind around it.
yeah. When it's like okay, so the two future, okay, and the other thing we don't know is we don't know where Buffalo would have been positioned. I don't think it's really ever stated what pick Buffalo has.
And I guess it doesn't really matter in this case since they're giving up a pick from this
Yeah,
year.
but you're essentially saying, hey, to move out of the first round completely, we're going to give you these two dudes, which,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
I think
odd.
one is a running back, they say.
Yeah, one is a running back who apparently Dennis Leary is pretty high on, and then the other one I don't think they mention his position.
Yeah,
But
but
again,
it's like, yeah, the running back.
Dennis Leary's obsessed with running backs, though.
Yeah, and Kevin Costner, looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. Because he said he doesn't block or whatever. And then Dennis Leary makes maybe his best point in the entire movie. He's like, I got 52 Tarzans in that locker room. I could use a Jane.
Good
like,
line.
yeah, I mean, it's like, here's the thing. It's like, I think even in 2014, to have a running back that's not gonna block, I just don't think that flies in the NFL the last 10 years.
It's tough. You better be like an astonishing runner.
Unless you're running like traditional I all the time and you're gonna have a fullback in there to be your blocking back.
Yeah, I kind of have
Like,
the impression. Like, I'm just basically imagining like the like Larry Zonka, Mercury Morris backfield of the '70s or something like that. I cannot imagine a modern offense running the way that Dennis Leary is describing it.
yeah. And then it's like, and I can't remember if this is later or not, but like Dennis Leary's whole thing about why he doesn't want Bo Callahan seems to be the fact that he says he doesn't like rookie quarterbacks.
Yeah, it comes across as like purely I'm lazy and don't want to deal with it.
Exactly. He's like, they get, you know, they're anxious and jittery. Whatever. It's like, first of all, if you still keep Brian Drew, you even though he's the number one overall pick, you don't have to play Bo Callahan this year. Like,
I mean, in theory, I guess he would have to like still train him. At which
sure.
point, I'm thinking Dennis Leary just doesn't feel like doing any work.
But it's like, so you've literally, though, if you know this is his system and people know it's his system, he's not quite enough. It's going to get out. People are like, all right, well, we don't have to worry about them ever taking a quarterback in the draft. Like, but you also have a GM who doesn't talk to his head coach. So,
True. All right. Frank Langella shows up in New York. He is, of course, wearing sunglasses indoors. He greets Roger Goodell in a completely pointless scene. I guess they just had Roger Goodell
got to get
line.
the commission in the movie, man.
I mean, he will come. Roger Goodell will come up later, and um, we'll save that for then.
Yeah.
Next scene, Kevin Costner goes in to meet with Jennifer Garner. They actually are discussing football, discussing the trade proposal from Buffalo. So Costner asks Jennifer Garner if she remembers the 1989 Super Bowl. She rattles off a bunch of details about the 49ers winning drive of the Bengals.
Sounds like it's right off a Wikipedia page.
Yes. Also, how is that relevant for anything? Like, you're basically just like romanticizing Joe Montana, but you're also talking about not drafting quarterback. Also, Jennifer Garner is not a scout. Jennifer Garner is a salary cap expert. She might be very good at it. We have no idea. This has nothing to do with like player evaluation.
Yeah.
It's just like basically a way to like throw football lore, I guess, into it, but it's just so confusing and it doesn't make any sense to
It's
like what they're discussing.
it's awkward fan service is what it is, or how it at least comes across. It's like,
Yeah.
that would be like, like and you could have done anything there. It's like, oh, do you remember Mike Jones tackling Kevin Dyson at the one and the 2000 Super Bowl? Which, like, it's weird to bring it up in that context. Obviously, like, maybe Mike Jones had happened before that play, looked up in the crowd and said, "Oh, look, there's blah blah blah."
There's Phil Collins. He just did the halftime show. That's cool.
Yeah, like, which, I mean, I also like, I'm assuming the story's true. Like, I don't know if it's one I've ever heard before, but
The John Candy one.
the John Candy one. But
I've heard it before. I'm whether it's true or not, I have no idea. But it's a thing that's been said before.
I
I will
mean,
say that if Sonny had brought up the Mike Jones story, considering that he's the one who's like wanting to draft a linebacker, a slightly undersized linebacker who's fast, like that makes more sense than bringing up Joe Montana. He's like aggressively like I'm trying to convince myself not to draft a
and it's
quarterback.
all about temperament. It's all he's caring about. It's not anything about ability. It's like just to be so calm in that.
And that's
And
why
then,
he wants to draft the guy that posted off an angry tweet and stick with the guy that just trashed his office.
yeah,
Like for
it,
all of Bo
it's
Callahan's many for all of Bo Callahan's many flaws, he's like the one character in this movie that it hasn't been revealed to have a temper.
yeah. He's And this is the funny thing. It's like outside of, because like, let's say that if we give Bo the benefit of the doubt with, say, somebody else is running the website, he has no involvement with it or whatever. Like, there's not a whole lot on the guy they get to in this movie that makes you be like, don't want him around. Now, if he's running this thing, okay. Like, I mean,
Well,
there's a
yeah,
thing, the next thing security guy brings up, it's like, it's not good, but
well, I mean, the story about the 21st birthday, I guess, is supposed to be the red flag, but it's just so minor compared to these. Like, it's, to me, the story about his teammates not coming to his 21st birthday is so much smaller than, say, if he had trashed his coach's office. Or I guess in this case, general manager's office, but like, okay.
yeah, going to the AD and trash his office or something.
Yeah. My other note about the John Candy story is that Kevin Costner and John Candy share my favorite scene of my favorite Kevin Costner movie, which is the scene in JFK. I have an extremely half-baked theory about how these movies are part of the same extended cinematic universe, but we've already gone too long, so we'll save that for another time.
Oh man.
So Sonny says, nobody can stop a ticking clock, but the great ones always find a way to slow it down. At which point Jennifer Garner says, so slow it down, Sonny. My follow-up note, I said a variation of this already, but there are not two characters in movie history I'm less convinced have had sex than these two.
It's,
Just remarkable lack of chemistry. Okay.
and I'll say this. There is no chemistry. However, the only time where they get flickers of it is when they're talking the football stuff. So when you're a guy whose entire life is football and you got a woman who can talk football with you,
Yeah, that's clearly the only thing they have in common.
I mean, they say as much basically.
Fair. All right. So Costner goes back to the war room. They pull up some clips of the Wisconsin-Ohio State game, which is relevant because Bo Callahan, Wisconsin, Vontae Mack, Ohio State. Um, all the guys are impressed about with Vontae Mack's highlights, his sacks. They're impressed by Bo Callahan throwing a last-second touchdown. So Costner makes the observation that Vontae Mack is down on the field for the last play of the game. One of the other guys in the war room notes that Vontae Mack had been kicked out of the game earlier. Kevin Costner is clearly surprised by this.
How the
Okay.
hell did they not know this?
How did Kevin Costner, of all people, like Vontae Mack fan number one, not be aware that he got kicked out of this game for touching a ref? Like, he wasn't like assaulting him. It's not like, I'm not sure that this necessarily is like a huge red flag, but how are you not at least aware of the story?
Yeah. And yet it's and the thing is too, it's like, there's a lot of stuff in this film session. Like this is the big thing it comes to, but like keep in mind that we're looking at this tape essentially at the request because Vontae said, watch what happens next after I sack him.
Yeah.
In an earlier conversation. So you see they show that Bo gets flustered on the play after a sack.
Yeah. Which is like, in the grand scheme of things, I think is reasonable, but also I probably wouldn't be emphasizing the game tape of the game they got kicked out of for making contact with an official.
Yeah. But they try
But
and this is the annoying thing is it's the two sides of Vontae Mack. Because the reason he gets the flag and eventually kicked out is because he hands the ball to his sister in the stands who appears to have cancer or
yeah,
something going on. And then
yeah, that is kind of weird because they never. So they reference that she died 6 months later. They don't reference like if the ball was because she was sick and this was like. It's just strange.
yeah,
It's
but
very.
here's the thing that we know too about media. If he was really kicked out, which, he touches the ref and then the coach are all like, oh, you can't do that. You can't do that. Which, to be clear, this is now another thing of when something doesn't happen that Vontae Mack wants to happen, he makes an irrational decision and
Yeah.
does something he shouldn't do. I akin it to like when I first saw it. What it reminded me of was like Travis Kelce throwing the flag back at the official. A few years back they got kicked out, and he was the guy. He's like at the time, but then he's come out. He's like, yes, I should not have done it. It
Yeah,
was the heat of the
exactly.
game, and I did it. But Mac just seems to keep doubling down. But here's the thing, too, though. As much as sports channels love to run with their stories, they love to run with these like, oh, his sister with cancer is in the stands. That would have
Yeah.
been all over this game. And then the fact that he got tossed out after getting the ball to his sister had cancer, there would have been controversy on that.
Like casual fans would have known the story.
Yeah.
And Sonny not only didn't know the backstory, he didn't know that he got kicked out at all. Like regardless of what the reason is, regardless of what is rational.
It, and it's funny because then they just try to keep, painting like, when Sonny says, that's his sister, she died 6 months later. And then like immediately Dennis Leary's like, oh, well, boo hoo. It's like, well, okay, you can have a heart about a dude giving the ball to his sister who's sick. And
Well, like the thing is, you can also make like a rational point of it and be like, well, that's sad, but also it shows a lack of judgment because like this was a penalty. Like, I'm
yeah.
not saying it doesn't make him a monster, but it does show that he wasn't
Well, an
thinking
honest
completely
question
clearly.
is handing the ball to fans in college, is that a penalty? I don't even know.
I think it is. That
Because
sounds right.
I know in the pros they get balls to people in stands all the time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like even so, if you know what you're doing, you take the penalty. You don't have to touch the ref afterwards.
Yeah, that was like clearly a terrible idea.
But at the same time, I think you can make the arguments like I get being heated given what he was doing, who he gave the ball to, and everything. But he should probably also know that it's going to be a penalty beforehand. Like if he's this good of a football player, he probably knows the game inside and out and would know that's not allowed.
All right. So, very quick follow-up scene here. Jennifer Garner is cleaning Sonny's office. Again, I'm not sure why she is. She's not like housekeeping. Like,
I mean,
but
Rick would make more sense to be in there.
yeah, absolutely. She finds a note on a green. She finds the green piece of paper. She looks at it. Just something to save away for later. Not a whole lot to say. Frank Langella gets interviewed by Rich Eisen on NFL Network. Another completely inconsequential cameo.
Yeah, always good to see
Um,
Rich Eisen though.
yeah, I mean, I like Rich Eisen, but truly an unnecessary scene. Other than it just reestablishes Frank Langella is wearing sunglasses.
Yeah, he's coy in
Always,
the interview. If I remember about, he's like, "I'm not going to tell you we're taking Poe Callahan."
because it wouldn't be very sporting to give away the answer. So Ralph, aka Warren from Something About Mary, he comes and interrupts a completely tedious conversation between Kevin Costner and Jennifer Garner, talking about how they don't want to be a secret anymore. We keep it a secret for the rest of the day at this point, but
Yeah,
he says he has something urgent to tell Kevin Costner. So apparently, so Washington is number 5 here. Save that for a second. They sent their playbook to potential picks, which includes Bo Callahan. So apparently, the Browns did absolutely no research on Bo Callahan, presumably because he wasn't going to be around at number 7. But the team that was drafting 2 earlier did at least enough research to like do something.
right.
Also, it's established canon that in this movie's universe, the RG3 trade did happen. So how does Washington have this pick? And how are they looking at a quarterback that they drafted number 2 overall 2 years prior? Just, okay.
You got 32 teams to pick from. You could have literally had about any other team.
For instance, they could have picked Denver. And you know why Denver would have made sense? Because Denver's the team that has number 5 pick when the draft actually happens.
I mean,
Maybe the pick was traded. Maybe they just completely messed it up. But like, why? So apparently Washington, though, they have a trick where they put a $100 bill at the back of the playbook just to see if guys read it. Bo Callahan apparently didn't mention $100, and when Washington asked about it, he lied again. Which is not bad intel to have about him being kind of like. This is based on a real life thing with Jamarcus Russell with DVDs that apparently the Raiders were just like giving him like blank DVDs, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I looked at the plays. I think the game plan looks great," kind of thing. But again, you are relying on secondhand information, further establishing that they have done absolutely nothing to prepare. Apparently, this was the second strangest response that Washington ever got from a quarterback.
Oh my gosh!
Because somebody else mailed the $100 back with a note that said, "Save it for when I win you a Super Bowl."
Who was that guy, Ryan? Or Ryan? Why did I just call you Ryan? Who was that guy, John?
So I do appreciate that Kevin's like, do you want to know who that he's like, do you want to know who that player was? He sent it back, and Kevin Costner just says no, because he's just sick of dealing with Ralph. But anyway, that player was Brian Drew. So
what?
I mean, a real juxtaposition between Brian Drew, who is extremely honorable, and Bo Callahan, who is a liar.
That second part of that, the whole Brian Drew thing, is so unnecessary to the point they're trying to make.
Yeah. Like, it's basically just... The whole idea, I guess, is basically that Brian Drew is clearly a person that Kevin Costner was very high on at one point, and he's basically, like, remembering what he loved about him in the first place. But again, Brian Drew hasn't done anything today to earn that. In fact, he's, like, behaved like a maniac.
Yeah, and I mean, and Kevin Costner, tries, to take credit for him being in Cleveland to start with, even though he wasn't there. He's like, yeah, but had I not told my dad, I'm like, what the heck is he doing telling his dad on a different team intel about a guy that he left?
I'm starting to think that maybe the Sonny Weaver Jr. is not very good at his job. Just a theory I'm working on. Next up, Kevin Costner gets a call from the Texans. So apparently the Texans, they have the number 15 pick, and they are apparently considering drafting Vontae Mack at 15. Costner refused to give up any information. Texans make a decent point, which is that there's no way Vontae Mack's going to fall to like the second round. So it's not like the Browns have any need for this information, but also surely, like, so much of this movie is based on the idea that NFL teams don't trust their own intel and that they're just constantly asking other people, what did I miss? What did I, like... And, like, the Texans' GM, like, in the grand scheme of things, seems, like, relatively competent, but apparently doesn't trust whatever work the team has put into scouting or interviewing Vontae Mack.
Yeah, this one was somehow less bizarre than a lot of the other GM conversations, but I don't know. It just felt like, they're like, and maybe it's because, like, and who knows about the chatter. Maybe he knows that just Sonny's really high on him. He's like, hey, I know you did your research. What else? Pardon me. But my other question is, like, if this guy is this good, like, how is, like, one team, like, how is he going to drop from 7 to 15? Like, because if one team doesn't take him, everybody else has good enough defenses that don't need a pass rushing linebacker. Like,
yeah, apparently, like, there are some cases, I guess, where, like, for instance, like the Alex Smith, Aaron Rodgers draft, where they were considered like pretty close. Like Aaron Rodgers, if anything, was considered the higher prospect whenever the process began, and then he like fell a long way. So like there is precedent for it, but it does seem pretty strange that there's nobody looking at even like trading up for the spot because again, like while Vontae Mack is not being considered a candidate for number one overall to the point that he's immediately assuming when the trade happens, well, I guess I'm not going to Cleveland. Like, he's still a first round pick by all accounts.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Yeah. Especially like, and obviously there's things we don't know. But like the guy at 15 is just like sitting there like, oh, yeah, I'm going to get him. Like, there could be stuff in the works where the team at 24 is like, hey, how do we trade up at 12 or 10 to get Vontae Mack? And a lot of those trades, to be fair, happen during the draft as it's happening live. Like those types of deals, those are the trades that you'll be like, okay, hey, like things we'll see later in the movie when the draft is taking place, for instance. But
all right, so next up we have Sonny goes back to his office, and his mom, played by Ellen Burstyn, and his ex-wife, which is like very briefly mentioned that it's his ex-wife, played by Rowena Arquette. They show up. Burstyn calls Jennifer Garner's character, Allie, Amy, despite the fact that she had been introduced like 5 seconds earlier. And like seemingly they've met before.
Yeah.
Which again, it's a secret relationship, but surely the very recent head coach of the team was aware of this.
I would think so.
Yeah. So the reason that Ellen Burstyn is there is to spread Sonny Sr.'s ashes on the practice field, which is per the will reading that was scheduled on draft day. Why they scheduled the will reading on draft day instead of like literally the next day or the day before, I could not begin to understand, but that was the decision that was made. They get very despite the fact that they were obviously like a football obsessed family, they're very negative towards Sonny Jr. for the fact that he skipped the will reading. I tend to have a little bit of sympathy for him on this. It seems like they really are like, specifically trying to get him to not show up to it.
Well, yeah, like when he brings the point, it's like, does this have to be today? Like, can't this wait? Like, I'm like, he's got a point. Like,
yes, like literally just do it. Like, do it 3 days later. The draft's completely over. It's fine.
Like, also, like, why is his ex-wife at the will reading? Like,
yeah, I was trying to determine. Like, presumably they don't have children because, like, Sonny's reaction to Jennifer Garner being pregnant is, I would assume the reaction. I mean, obviously, I don't have children, but it seems like the reaction of a first-time parent, where there's like a lot of like concern and worry.
well, yeah, I mean, they have the conversation, and honestly, I can't remember if it's before or after this, but Jennifer Garner's like, I don't know how to do this either. I'm not this type or whatever. So it's like, it certainly seems like, neither of them have any children.
Yeah, I would assume so. Costner and Garner do go out onto the practice field for a minute. Costner reveals that he fired his dad because his mom asked him to because of his father's health. They were concerned that he was going to like just die like on national TV during a game. Okay. But this is, you're going to have a child with this person. You've never mentioned this to like your partner. Like, I don't know. It's hard for me to quite buy that amount of it.
Yeah, it's...
And like, why does he have to, and why is he having to like keep this a secret from his dad? Like, his dad has to die believing that his son fired him. Just is unnecessary.
Yeah, well, and then it doesn't make sense for the hostility that the family harbors towards him if his mom asked him to do it.
Yeah,
Why
I
would
guess
his mom be pissed at him?
I guess the other members of the family, I don't know. It's so
what this movie teaches you is that communication is actually important in any sort of interpersonal relationship, whether that be work, family, friends. Communicate, people. That's what this movie teaches you.
The valuable lessons of draft day.
Yes.
So the next thing that happens is the whole Brown staff, other than Sonny and Jennifer Garner, because they're already out there, look out for the spreading of the ashes. For some reason, Sonny's like really confused. Like, it
Yeah.
seems really obvious why he would why they'd be doing it. Like, he worked there for a long time. Like,
yeah. Presumably, they all worked with him. Even if they didn't, they want to be there to support you. Like, yeah.
all right. Next, Kevin Costner apologizes to intern Rick for breaking his laptop, which he had done kind of for no particular reason other than just like a fit of rage. And just generally apologized for how everyone's been treating Rick, which I appreciated. You know, it's insufficient, but it's at least a start.
Yeah. We love you, Rick.
Or Rick. Next, we cut to the draft red carpet. Bo Callahan is referred to as the 2014 Heisman Trophy winner. He would be 2013 Heisman Trophy winner because this draft is happening in like April of 2014. Just a easily preventable error, I believe, on the part of the filmmakers. Frank Langella, for some reason, is shown chatting with Ray Lewis about when he got drafted. I don't know why this happens at all. Like, why would Frank Langella just be like openly like, "Oh, you went like first or second, right?" Like, why?
More fan service.
It just like it's a reason to get more famous people in the movie. But like, if you have Ray Lewis, like, why don't you have him like consulting in some way with Vontae Mack, like the comparable like linebacker? There's ways you can make it a lot more organic than this. It just doesn't make any sense.
Or even if you just want to like have him, like just have it be unintelligible conversation. Like, oh, okay, Ray Lewis is just here and he's chatting it up with him.
Yeah, they make no effort to make any of these cameos seem remotely organic.
Oh no. They're just like, look, here's a football guy. Ha 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 ha. Yay.
Yeah, they're expecting that you're just going to get extremely excited about just seeing Ray Lewis.
I mean, if he wants me to and doesn't want to unalive me.
Yeah, Ray Lewis has been incredibly accused of some things that are comparable to some things that the next person I'm about to talk about has been incredibly accused of, which is P. Diddy. P. Diddy gets a call from Sonny, and he hands the phone over to Bo Callahan. At this point, Kevin Costner asks if his teammates came to his birthday party. Bo claims that he doesn't remember anything from that night, which honestly not a bad lie. I expect it's a lie, but
not a bad lie, but could be the truth. But
yeah, it's plausible. And Costner's even like, I don't really remember mine either. So that's just kind of the end of the conversation. For some reason, Bo lies to P. Diddy about the call.
Well, what did he ask? Nothing.
Incentive to do that, and yet he does.
Yeah.
All right. Now Jennifer Garner comes into Sonny's office. Sonny says that Callahan is a winner, and that's what everyone says. Jennifer Garner says they said the same thing about Ryan Leaf, which I'm pretty sure is not true. So Ryan Leaf, they did win the Pac-10 his final year in college, but he never seriously competed for a national title. He got spanked by Michigan in the Rose Bowl for his final career game. She says that no one said that about Tom Brady. Tom Brady won the Orange Bowl in his final college game. I don't know what they're talking about here.
Yeah.
It's like an incredibly reductive, which again, it's not Jennifer Garner's job to know about like this draft minutia.
Yeah.
But maybe he should consult with somebody who does know about it.
Well, it's basically they're just like, hey, you make bad comparisons. You're just like, hey, this player bad, this player good, and trying to make everything kind of flow into it. But yeah, the fact that Jennifer Garner's essentially acting as his assistant GM in this entire movie, like
It's a
Just
problem.
put her in that role then. Like, just
Yeah, it
just
is
go full
interesting.
nepotism. I mean, we're suspending belief here.
Well, she seems at least as qualified to be in that room as any of the other guys. I mean, granted, the other guys are all bozos. It's not like this is high praise towards
Yeah,
her, but all
yeah.
right, now we. But
No, you're good.
all right, next we're going to cut back to the NFL draft. The countdown clock expires. Roger Goodell, in the year 2014, walks out to uproarious cheers from the crowd, a thing that has never happened, definitely wouldn't have happened then. Traditionally, the commissioner will congratulate the Super Bowl champ, but since the Super Bowl champ in this universe the worst record in the league the year before, he doesn't say anything like that.
Yeah.
The cheering is really to remind you how much input the NFL had on this. Though you would think that, like, if it had been Gary Bettman, they would have absolutely been doing him, and he would have like kind of just embraced his role of heel. Like Roger Goodell
Yeah,
being cheered is insane.
yeah. Like I don't know that any like commissioner like would be cheered.
I
Like
think
maybe Silver.
I think Silver got cheered his first draft, which is a combination of it being his first draft and he had just done the Donald Sterling suspension, which is
Yeah,
very popular. But that's definitely not a thing that was happening a lot. And also that's a thing that happened like a few months after draft day came out, so it wouldn't even be like in the culture yet.
yeah. It's weird that I get you're just trying to put on the face, but yeah, it's like anybody who thought that was logical, but
All right,
the Cleveland Browns are on the clock.
We've had some criticisms of this movie so far. This movie is about to really step it up.
Boy, man, do they cram a lot of crap into the next like 15 minutes of movie time, man.
Yeah. So, for some reason, Sonny's in his office and not in the draft war room. He sends in the pick, and even other Browns personnel are not aware of who the pick's going to be. They're just watching on TV like anybody else.
They don't even know if the pick's been sent in.
Yeah, like he has to go in there and be like, "I sent in the pick," and they're like, "No, it's tradition. We all send it in." And his excuse is very stupid.
Once we start winning, then we can all do it. Oh, so you're going to be the savior? Like,
yeah, because he's clearly not related to the fact that they're not winning.
Yeah, it's
So Roger Goodell comes out to announce the pick, and there are some flaws in this scene, no question. This is my single favorite part of the movie, though, is this reveal. Even though, like, I knew it was happening as soon as it was happening.
it's telegraphed, but yeah.
Yeah. So they cut to so they have Bo Callahan, Ray Jennings, and Vontae Mack all in different panels as the pick's being announced. The pick's announced, and what do you have? What do you know? Vontae Mack goes number 1. Bo looks very dejected immediately. Ray looks completely apathetic because, like, he knew he wasn't going number 1.
Yeah.
There was no part of him. Vontae looks like an out-of-body experience. He just looks so happy. And he is at his, I believe, his grandma's house.
Yeah, grandmother's house in Virginia. Yep.
Yeah. And, I enjoy watching him being this happy. Everyone's going crazy. They cut to some Browns fans at a bar who look every bit as mad as, like, Cavs fans did whenever LeBron did the decision. Like, whenever they had all those, like, footage of that. People just, like... Frank Langella throws Bo Callahan jersey to the ground and storms off. They cut to Brian Drew, who's watching the draft with his wife and daughter. They start celebrating, which, it's kind of fun because, like, that's a realistic reaction.
Yeah. It's like, oh, they do have faith in me despite the fact that I committed crimes today. That's cute.
Yeah. The war room in Cleveland is very mad and very rightfully so. Because, again, they were not part of this experience at all. The Costner made the pick, and that was just that was it. So Bo
It's an insane thing that happened, and a guy who, if Vontae Mack was going to be your pick too, like, wouldn't you have just looked to trade out of that spot? And maybe the fact that he just decided it too late. But did he really make the decision that late, John? Did he?
you know he didn't, because the piece of paper is revealed that he had written on before all of the action of this movie happened, really. And it says, Vontae Mack, no matter what. You can go ahead and just rewind this podcast a while and look at all of the things that happened to get to this point. But
on the first car ride the guy took, after writing that on a piece of paper, he traded up to number one.
a guy who, and Costner will mention this soon, but like, he could have just drafted Vontae Mack at number 7. Everybody agrees to this, and yet. So Bo Callahan is at the draft, unlike Vontae, and he storms off. So at this point, P. Diddy comes out and says, "This is the FL draft," in a terrible, like, trying to like hype it up kind of way. Like,
Yeah,
I honestly wanted him
happen.
to look straight. I want him to look at the camera and say, "This is draft day."
Nah, Chris Berman did that in the opening monologue.
Yeah, draft day is said several times in the course of this movie as just a phrase, but that, like, it makes sense. It's not like it's a like it's a totally absurd thing. Yeah, but that would have been like a really great way to do it. So Franklin calls, tells Jennifer Garner that he will, quote, be in Peterborough in an hour. I'm not sure what Peterborough is. I tried looking this up. It's not a city in Ohio that I could tell, but regardless, he's going to be back. He says he's going to be back at the Browns facility in an hour. Okay, so he is in New York at Radio City Music Hall, which is in Manhattan, which is famously a very high traffic area. So I ran Google Maps from Radio City Music Hall to each of the 3 major airports in the New York area. They're all pretty close in terms of how far away they are, but the closest one was LaGuardia, 24 minutes away.
Okay.
So the good news, distance between Cleveland's International Airport and the Browns facility, it's only like 5 minutes.
Okay.
But this is going to require a flight from LaGuardia to Cleveland in 31 minutes. Now, obviously, he's not flying commercial. Maybe he doesn't have to go through like security checkpoints or whatever.
When you fly private, you don't have to.
Yeah, the quickest direct flight that I could find was 1 hour and 48 minutes, which, again, I'm sure on private is quicker. I'm not buying that it's a 31-minute flight. That is...
No. Might be an hour of airtime, but yeah, I mean, obviously they put taxi time into those flights and stuff.
And we will later learn, based on when he does arrive, he arrives, so he leaves after the first pick is made, so number 2 is on the clock. Number 5 is on the clock when he gets back to Cleveland.
Yeah, it's a little ridiculous.
It's absurd. Like, why did he actually have to go to New York other than to make these cameos? Just have him stay in Cleveland and have him just be mad right away. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't. But you want to make a splash, John.
So Vontae Mack gets a call from Sonny. This is the point that I kind of remember that he did not call Vontae Mack to let him know he was going to draft him, which is a thing. Like, I get why from the movie perspective that happened, because it allows him to be excited.
But it never happens.
No, it never happens. Maybe he was worried that Vontae was going to tweet out the information ahead of time. I don't know, but I'm willing to forgive this one just because it sets up a fun scene, but it's objectively silly.
Yeah.
Kevin Costner mentions Jennifer Garner about how he could have just drafted Vontae Mack at number 7, which, correct. Yeah, that's... So while he's commiserating with Jennifer Garner in his office, the Veep guy barges in and says Sonny won't believe what's happening. We cut to NFL Network draft coverage. The ticker on the bottom shows that the St. Louis Rams, who had the number 2 pick in this draft, They drafted tackle Robert Anderson out of MIZZ, so presumably that's University of Missouri. As a fan of the St. Louis Rams at this time, I guarantee you this guy was a terrible player in the pros. This guy was a bust. He was worse than Greg Robinson, maybe not quite as bad as Jason Smith, but it didn't go well.
Yeah. High drafted offensive lineman. No.
At number 2 especially, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as much as we would love a Mizzou guy, nah.
Though this was the draft that the Rams did draft number 2 overall and drafted a tackle. So there's that. But
Yeah.
so the Dolphins appear to have selected defense end Patrick Palmer out of Stanford. So I don't know what the specific need that the Browns had for an offensive tackle or defensive end, but neither of these names mentioned at all a single time by anybody. Despite the fact that, like, surely the number 2 and number 3 picks should at least be on their radar enough to, like, know what they're dealing with and know if they want to acquire these players, even if they're not at high positions of need.
Yeah, I get for time's sake in a movie you have to narrow your player pool, but the fact that your guy that you could have had at 7 was just still in play at 1.
So Dennis Leary explains the situation, Sonny, which is that everyone's panicking. The Rams and Dolphins went with the player they were expected to pick, and the reason that they didn't jump on Callahan is because they're worried that Cleveland knows something about Bo Callahan. This is maybe the most ridiculous football part of the entire movie.
Yeah.
The idea that let's forget that the Cleveland Browns are like a bit of a laughingstock. We'll just set that aside. We'll pretend this is like the Patriots or some like super respected organization. If the Patriots pass on the guy, no team in the NFL who has done their own independent research and determined their own stances on these players is going to be like, oh, well, this guy must be bad. You're going to be like, oh, take this guy. He's falling. That's great. And the idea that this passing has to be based on something that they learned about Callahan is like silly.
Yeah, it's the fact that, like, honestly, St. Louis did, like, if they really didn't need the quarterback, how many teams would have picked up the phone immediately after Vontae Mack's name was called? It would have been trying to get to the number 2 pick.
Bingo.
Like, if this guy really was this can't miss prospect, he wouldn't fall that way. Like, you may have teams, you may have had the Dolphins at 3, but, like, I know that none of these teams end up taking him or whatever, but it's like, it makes no sense in the sense of, like, if the guy is really this generational prospect, like, Aaron Rodgers had already begun falling before he dropped. There was concerns that had come out, and frankly, which, I mean, to be fair, like, Alex Smith didn't have a bad career, but he wasn't Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
But that's the nature of how things
I would actually argue that Alex Smith had Brian Drew's career. We're like, he's fine.
Yeah. It's not a bad comparison.
But, like, so the Rams having the number 2 pick makes me think of a situation that we brought up a couple times, which is in 2012, the Rams had the number 2 pick, and there was this very acclaimed quarterback that was going to be available. Even if RG3 had somehow gone 1, then Andrew Luck's available. But the Rams, regardless, were pretty happy with the quarterback they had in Sam Bradford.
Yeah.
Their move was not, oh, we're going to draft this other player over the equivalent to Bo Callahan because this is a position of need. Their saying was, hey, some team's going to offer us a mint in order to move up to this pick. Let's do it. Let's make the move that's going to be best for our organization. And neither they nor the Dolphins nor the Arizona Cardinals do any of this. The Denver Broncos are next up on the board at number 5, which again, not sure why they have that pick instead of Washington, who was referenced earlier to have it. But they are considered unlikely to draft Callahan because they have an all-pro quarterback. Makes sense that they wouldn't draft him, I suppose. But again, they can trade the pick.
Yeah. Like, to me, and this goes into the next thing and the next, but like, Seattle's sitting there like, why isn't Seattle trying to trade back up?
Yeah, and Seattle's presence does become an issue here because the entire Cleveland War Room is concerned that Seattle could just end up taking Bo Callahan at number 7. Never mind that
You
they're
mean
not.
like they could have done with Avonte Mack to begin with?
God, this movie's bad.
It's like,
so here's the issue. So Denver ends up drafting, I don't remember what position it was. It wasn't a quarterback though.
not a quarterback.
Yeah. So now Jacksonville's on the clock. Kevin Costner does not know the name of the general manager of the Jacksonville Jaguars, which I would assume that if you're an NFL GM, you probably know the names of the other GMs pretty easily.
John, he's a rookie.
He is and boy does he show himself to be a rookie.
This is the scene that, honestly, more than anything else, the scene in the poor Jacksonville GM pissed me off more than anything in this movie.
Yeah, this is going to be rough. So, the GM's name is Jeff Carson. He is immediately revealed to be a completely panicky idiot. Like, he basically has the like I would compare him to like a George Costanza level of like neuroses. Like, he is just terrified about the fact that he has the number 6 pick. Because he had no intention of taking Bo Callahan, because he, like everybody else, assumed he was going to go higher. But the idea of him being able to take this highly acclaimed player at a lower spot just terrifies us. So it reminds me a little bit of in the second season of The Office, Michael Scott goes to, like, a meeting of the regional managers in New York, and the other manager, I think his name's Craig. I don't know, whatever his name is. There's like the one guy just like is clearly a complete buffoon. Like, he doesn't even like prepare a presentation. He's like, I thought this was more of like he thought it was more of a meet and greet. It kind of feels like this, where like, Sonny Weaver Jr. kind of our Michael Scott, but like he at least has some baseline level that's not a high bar, but it's something. So Jeff Carson says that the Rams took his pick. Cleary said the Rams took their expected pick, so I'm not sure who's wrong here, but I do kind of believe that the Jaguars GM did think that he was going to get the guy that the Rams took because he's a moron.
I mean, at this point, then he's only had 3 other picks to. I mean,
yeah, he's been.
These guys have draft boards. Like, if a guy goes, you go to the next highest guy on your board, or you trade out. Like,
okay, so I do have the pick. Arizona picks Robert Starks, a cornerback out of Georgia Tech. We also haven't heard this guy's name. None of the players drafted between 2 and 5 are players that we have heard the Cleveland Browns mention a single time.
Yep.
So the Jags GM is freaking out because he wants to know what's wrong with Callahan. Costner says that he thinks Callahan's a bust, which just serves to make the Jags GM more upset because he's like a child.
Well, yeah, it's so funny too. Like, they try to play up the fact that he's a rookie GM. It's like, you realize that, like, the amount of war rooms these guys have probably been in before they're made GMs, like, it's stupid to make this guy out as panicky as he is, because there's no way he'd be that way, and his war room wouldn't let him get that panic.
presumably at least one person in the Jaguars war room has been in a draft room before.
One would hope.
So Costner offers 2 second-round picks for the number 6 pick. And as dumb as the Jaguars GM is, he's at least smart enough to not fall for this, because that's a pretty stupid offer. Costner counters with a 3rd second-round pick, which, if you look at like the draft value charts, starts to at least venture into like plausibility. But
right.
the Jaguars, again, because they're scared, decide to go with it. We are greeted once again by our good friend Frank Langella. He has walked into the war room from his magical plane, and Costner tells. So he just calls. Costner, once he makes this trade, calls up Tom Michaels in Seattle, and Costner gets a little judgy towards Tom Michaels for thinking that Jeff Carson's name is John Carson, even though he also didn't know his name as of like 5 minutes before this.
Yeah.
Costner tells Tom Michaels that he's going to take Bo Callahan and tells Seattle to make him an offer to move up the 1 spot. Which, I don't know exactly what the proper math is for this, but I'll tell you what it's not. It is not Seattle trading all of the draft picks back that he got.
This is just so bad.
A number 7 draft pick and 2 future first round picks to move up 1 spot. Okay.
And the sales pitch is you saved your team a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And you still get Bo Callahan.
Yeah, apparently Seattle needed to hire Allie away to have a cap manager. So Costner does makes that point based on just sort of saving money against the cap. So the other thing that he appeals to is the fact that Seattle fans are mad, which they are, but also it doesn't matter. So we've established already Kevin Costner doesn't understand what Twitter is. He says that he checked, quote, the Seahawks blogs and chat rooms. Chat rooms.
Yeah, what is this like?
We're talking about chat rooms.
Not social media.
Not social media. Not social media. We're talking about chat rooms.
Oh, shoot, man. It's...
So, Seattle accepts the deal. But then Sonny, and at this point he's just kind of mimicking their earlier conversation in the movie.
Yeah. What else do we need?
Says that the deal is off the table because they live in a different world than they did. I can't remember what.
30 seconds ago.
30 seconds ago. Okay. Yeah, some time frame.
It's something like that, yeah.
He puts the phone on mute and he starts asking around the room saying, what else do they need? Jennifer Garner, who, again, not involved with personnel, not involved with scouting, but she suggests David Putney, who is apparently a punt return specialist.
A punt returner.
A punt returner.
What?
So, here's the thing about David Putney. He is apparently... like, there's no way he's like the second coming of like, you know, Dante Hall, Devin Hester, one of these like ace kind of returners, because Seattle wouldn't be that quick to part with them. But also, like, it seems that this is purely just Kevin Costner just wanting to say that he won. It's just him wanting to get something. Clearly. And yeah, the confidence is, I want David Putney. I need a punt returner. Like, all right, I guess.
Yeah, like if you're willing to trade the picks and that's your up, I'm like, whatever. Like,
yeah, that is a very small amount. Yeah. So as Costner's badgering him. He says the one F-bomb of the movie. Would you like to say the line, or would you like me to say the line? I feel like we can say it once and still be a PG-13 episode.
I say I will let you have the honor.
Say it with me, Tom, you pancake-eating motherfucker. This line apparently has broken Tom. Seattle agrees to the deal. The war room goes ballistic. So here's the thing. This trade, like objectively, you move down one spot and you got 2 first-round picks and a punt returner that presumably is of some value to you. That's a steal. Like that,
Oh,
no
yeah.
question. But you had to make it was basically just repairing the mistakes you made already. Because even though you ended up getting a known overall pick, you used it on a guy that you could have drafted much later. Like the end calculus basically is that they traded 3 second round picks, including the one from this year. So a decently high second. It would be the 39th overall pick, I guess, unless there's ties, but somewhere around there. For essentially like a late, like bottom half the top 10 kind of pick.
Yeah.
That's like a B plus draft. Like it is, and we'll get to the acclaim that Sonny gets here, but this is not like he's fine. He did okay.
Well, it's more of what the heck was the Seattle? What was Tom doing? Like,
yeah, Tom was just like completely consumed by the fact that of like public sentiment. But in the end, he's not really hurt by it because, like you mentioned, he pays less for Bo Callahan. He loses David Putney, who presumably is not the end of the world. It's not going to break the franchise.
yeah.
But they end up with the guy they were going to get anyway. It's just, there's a lot of it kind of feels like a magic trick. There's a lot of things that happen. There's a lot of weird moves, a lot of kind of illusions, but it doesn't really amount to that much.
Yeah. It's funny for as much as Dennis Leary spends the movie harping on, like you're trading away the future. You're trading away, like they still lost 3 second round picks. Like that's decent players that you're going to miss out on drafting over the course of the next this year and the next 2.
And like I said, when it comes to the Jags, the trading 3 second rounders for like that level of first round pick is like, it's fine. It's not bad, but it's like kind of a wash.
Yeah.
And like ultimately it's going to come down to how good these players are, but we have no reason to believe that they've gotten great talent.
Yeah.
Like, so just to clear up what happens here. So the number 6 pick now goes to Seattle. They draft Bo Callahan. And then number 7. So Cleveland's on the clock. Dennis Leary very confidently says, we take Ray Jennings. Just kind of a sweet little moment where Costner's like, yeah, I've been saying we need to get a running back. And they kind of are on the same page here. They draft Ray Jennings, who is, I guess, excited to be a Brown. Kind of has a weird reaction when he gets a phone call from Dennis Leary, which, I mean, he should be very excited that he got a call from somebody. Vontae Mack didn't get one of those.
It's true.
So
that's Arian Foster acting for you, though.
Yeah. So Frank Langella congratulates Sonny. The best I can rationalize this is that because all of these moves were happening, that was splashy. That like all of this action caused some sort of excitement. But that's going to be basically forgotten within a day.
Yeah, but I also think in the first conversation, like he had Ray even as a splashier move than Vontae. So ending up with Ray also maybe satisfies his splash
I guess.
desires.
Yeah.
It's
But
like,
this will not be the end of people praising Sonny Weaver Jr. for apparently just having the greatest night that a GM's ever had.
yeah,
Uh, Chris Berman and Rich Eisen are both raving about the job Sonny did, which again, they trade 3 second round picks to move up and draft a running back who can't block, and they got a punt returner.
yeah.
Again, this is fine. This is probably like ranking like ninth or so on like instant draft grades. Which draft grades are stupid because we don't know how these guys are going to turn out, but there's no reason to believe in this moment that they did something spectacular.
Right. It's
Next,
crazy.
yeah. So next up, they cut to the Browns draft party. Vontae Mack is extremely excited to be there. Ray Jennings looks kind of apathetic still. Turns out that Chadwick Boseman might be a better actor than Arian Foster. Just something worth considering.
You know, say reports are indicating this could be true.
So Ellen Burstyn tells Sonny that he did a good job. He responds, not immediately, but pretty quickly after, by saying that Jennifer Garner is pregnant, which seems to make Ellen Burstyn happy, which kind of... I'm not sure why she's suddenly on board with Allie. Not really sure what she did, given how cold she was earlier. So Costner and Garner kiss for the first time in this movie, and possibly for the first time in their relationship. Rick watches this because he's apparently not allowed to anything go right for him today. He's just kind of there.
Poor Rick.
Poor Rick. All right, and now as we get towards the very end of the movie, we cut to the only part of the movie that does not take place on draft day itself. It takes place during what I presume is the first game of the season, but it's definitely the Browns' first game at home.
Yeah.
So Jim Brown and Bernie Kosar both congratulate Frank Langella on the draft. This was also Jim Brown's final film appearance.
Mm.
So they're congratulating him on the draft, which it's insane that they're still talking about the draft. It does not make any sense at this point. This is like the draft happened, what, 5 months ago at this point? Like, why would that be?
Yeah.
I do like the line that Frangella says in response, which is, I can't take all the credit, but I will.
Hey, that's knowing who you are.
It's a very owner line. So the team emerges coming out of the tunnel. You see Vontae Mack, you see Ray Jennings, you see Brian Drew. You don't see David Putney, which I'm not really sure. Maybe he got
special
caught
teams guy don't come out early in the tunnel, because
yeah.
I mean, conceivably he would also be like a fourth or fifth wide receiver, you would think too, or defensive back.
So I'm pretty sure this is the first time I've ever actually watched the credits for this movie. For some reason, it's just a bunch of random pictures of NFL players. When they show Jennifer Garner's name, they show Danny Woodhead as the corresponding player. When they show Sam Elliott, he gets Peyton Manning. This felt appropriate. This felt like the level of respect the movie had.
Yeah, I mean, the sheriff was Sam Elliott. That makes sense. Danny Woodhead, yeah. I mean, Chadron State legend, but
yeah. So that is draft day.
This was a talk on the movie draft day, a rant on the movie draft day, if you will. That was almost twice as long as the movie draft day.
Yeah. Again,
gosh,
we have put more thought into this movie than the people that made this movie. I am quite certain of that.
You're probably not wrong about this.
But yeah, despite the many flaws that we've mentioned, if you're watching the movie on Peacock for free, go for it. Why not?
There's worse things to watch, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, so
The absurdity actually is kind of fun. You know,
yeah,
if have a drink and watch the movie, you can laugh at the absurdity at times.
let's put it this way. Whenever I mentioned to my wife that we were doing this as the movie, and I was like, I'm going to watch this, and she was kind of deciding whether she wanted to watch it because she had never seen it, and she was like, "Is this a movie that I'm going to have to like pay attention to?" I said, "It's probably for the best if you don't pay attention to it." It, it is a good background noise kind of movie. It is a movie to put on while you do something else.
Yeah, I asked my wife if she had any interest at all. I said it's you don't have to know much about football, and she's like, I have zero interest in watching this with you. So
Yeah, I'm sure this past would really change her mind on it.
yeah, and I think too, like it's a good movie too. Like if you're a person that like doesn't mind watching movies like on your phone or something, like it's just like I watched it once on the phone and once on TV. It doesn't lose anything on the phone. Like
Yeah, there's no like big spectacular set pieces that you need to like get a full
yeah, I mean,
theatrical like
Frank Langella's sunglasses are smaller on your phone, but that's about it.
yeah. I think that this actually is like kind of makes sense that like this seems like a movie that if it were being released 10 years later would have just gone like straight to Netflix or whatever. Like it feels like a movie to watch at home. The fact that it
Yeah,
didn't gross that much in theaters, like I didn't see this movie in theaters. Like I
no.
rented the DVD
I
from the
remember we
library.
yeah say it's like I remember we talked about it when it came out because we were like, oh, dude, this is coming out, and then I I didn't watch till years later. Like because as soon as you heard stuff coming out, it's just like, and then like even the trailers like didn't get me excited for this movie. Like I was watching the trailers for it and stuff, rewatching them, and I'm like, oh, like it doesn't paint the picture. It's definitely a GM story that just happens to take place on draft day. Like,
Yeah.
as opposed to, honestly, I think a draft day story, like the GM side is like, it's interesting to me, but I don't think you can make it entertaining and accurate. I think it's a hard thing to do just because it's not, it'd just be a lot of either texting or talking on the phone, even if you want to do it, like kind of things. But, you know, do something where you look at the draftees and that kind of stuff. And I know, like,
Yeah.
obviously those shows, those path of the draft and that kind of stuff. But
And if you made this movie more realistic, it would take place over a much longer period of time. It would be much slower. And then we wouldn't be like making fun of the movie as much as far as like its realism, but we would be saying this movie's boring. I will say that for all of the problems of this movie, I don't think this is a boring movie at all. Like I think like stuff happening.
yeah, it has moments for me where it drags.
I mean, there's no
Where
like
like,
action scenes or anything, but yeah, it's
yeah, I just mean even though like some of the scenes that happen, though, it's like we get it. You don't have to keep hammering us over the head with what's happening. But and the other thing, and I know I mentioned this too, like the transitions between scenes are just like there's the overlay ones like we kind of talked about, but then there's just some that are like it's like a swipe right transition in Microsoft PowerPoint. Like it's just the
yeah.
editing in this film is not great.
There's
But
an episode of The Simpsons that's like slightly post Prime Simpsons, where Homer is making a dating video for Ned Flanders, and he insists on just using a star wipe in between every transition. That's kind of what this felt like. It felt like It felt like somebody was just like they had one move and they decided they were going to just beat it into the ground.
yeah, if we upgrade it, we can get different transitions, but we get these two if we just keep the free version. Let's keep the free version. But yeah, I hope you
All right,
guys enjoyed
I think we've
our 4-hour podcast.
yeah, I think we've probably gone on long enough.
Yeah,
Hopefully everybody's able to clear out some space on their phones to make room for this download.
so you're welcome for entertainment for half of your workday.
That's right.
But, you know, quick promo plugs, and I'm sorry if I'm slowing down speak. I'm not gonna lie, guys, we're doing this. It's like 11:30 at night now, and I'm old and tired. Like, I'm sure you heard a few times I tried to not make it audible, but I was yawning, and so I do apologize for that. But what can I say? Follow the podcast on Twitter at Draft Day Pod. Obviously, leave us reviews on Spotify, and we'll try to build up. Give us your ideas. You can follow me at Draft Day Dadshaw. Follow John on all his multitude of things at JohnJF125. Check out stlbullpen.com for some fun baseball stuff, given that the Cardinals were losing 14-1 the last time I saw them this evening. Who knows what that game ended up, but I'm sure John will have some fun things to write about with their recent string of play.
They did lose 14-1. That was the final, but
okay.
Yeah, like Jason said, you can follow me, JohnJF125, at steelbullpen.com. Next episode that we do has not been recorded yet, but should be a draft and should be another bit of a deviation from the norm.
Yeah, and I will. I'll say, if you're curious as to what the other draft is, it's going to be almost in conjunction with a draft. We'll be recording it a week from tonight, hopefully, which is Tuesday, which will be the day after the conclusion of the draft that we'll be basing our draft on.
I don't know what you're talking about, but that's okay.
If you know, you know.
And I don't.
And what I know now is it's late. You've listened to us enough, but as always, we appreciate you guys listening, and we will see you on the flippity flap.
Hi, everybody.